Okay, very good. My apologies, everyone. We had a little bit of technical difficulties and we're proceeding without the owl tonight. So you can watch us on YouTube live and on Zoom. And our call the planning board meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda is a public hearing, 250 Turnpike Road. I don't know if you want to get us up to date, Karina, and if anyone can hear
Yes.
you.
Let me get you up to date and let me check the attendees who we have there.
Can you hear her?
Can
No.
you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but they can't hear you in the room.
Okay.
I wonder if I turn. Yeah. Try speaking, Karina, and see if they hear you.
Can you
now.
hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, okay.
Okay. All right. So I was looking to see if Brian Chavelle, who represents the Ferris Development Group.
We
is
have him
in-
here in person.
Oh, you're there in person. Okay, thank you. All right. All right, super. So let me get you up to speed. So at the last planning board public hearing for this project was on August 22nd, 2022, and it was continued to this evening. In the meantime, we received Mullins form signed and filed with the town clerk for Jesse Stein's absence at that meeting. We received Fuss and O'Neill review comments of their initial submission of the applicant's submissions, which were distributed to the applicant, the planning board. The applicant was asked to follow up with the Board of Health to make sure they knew of the change of use of the facility. We received submission number 2 from Azimuth Engineering, the applicant's engineer, on September 6th. This was submitted to Fuss and O'Neill, Planning Board, and the town departments. On the 7th, we received a potential extension request to extend the action deadline for the planning board, as the deadline is coming up for this major site plan, September 24th. So if the project's public hearing is going to be continued, we'll need to have the planning board grant an extension and a continuation. Then, let's see, we received a letter from neighbors and residents to the planning board dated September 8th with their comments regarding submission number 2, and I believe the project in general. And that brings us to this evening, September 12th. This is the public hearing number 2. And as you see, Brian Chavelle, attorney representing Ferris Development, is in the audience. That's my update.
Very good. Thank you.
You're
Mr. Chavelle, welcome.
Evening, Madam Chair, board members, staff. Again, I'm Brian Charvel, General Counsel for Ferris Development Group, and I represent the applicant 250. I thank Karina for her update. We agree with what she covered, so you've heard about the things and hopefully seen the updated filings we've made. Among them was not just our engineer's letter, but also an updated lighting plan and a photometric plan to address concerns that had come up 3 weeks ago, and a revised landscape plan. So we had hoped to continue the discussion tonight, but at 4:30 today, I was provided a copy of the abutters letter, which raises a number of items, detailed items. And so we wanted to take time to digest those and have some responses and come back to you to talk about it more in a couple of weeks.
Okay, very good. So we'll go through the planning board. Any questions or comments? Mr. Mills?
Kind of weird.
I know. I don't know if I,
Just for the record, should we state who's here? Because I don't have my camera on, because I can't log in. So,
He's here well, so.
You should probably do a quick roll call of the planning board members. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah.
okay. So you want to postpone conversation tonight and just
That's the rest, we're just
discuss it?
continue the hearings, we have time to digest the neighbors' concerns.
For the neighbors.
Okay.
But do you want comments on the submission number 2?
We're open to them, but
Okay,
we understand that they did just come in after Labor Day. And so I think maybe Fuss and O'Neill will still be reviewing them, hasn't had a chance
Right.
to respond as with other town departments. So we're happy just to pick up the conversation with those updates that happen as well.
No.
any questions? Ms. Houlihan?
My only comment was, we all just got the abutters letter too. I think there is some really pertinent information there for you to digest. And then on the lighting plan, there was still light trespass in your lighting plan. So we just can't have light trespass, period. So it's just needs to be corrected. And other than that, I can have my comments. I have no comments.
Oh, forgot about you. Sorry, Jesse. Any questions or comments, Mr. Stein?
Thanks. I'll save my questions for the next hearing. Thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to thank you for saving the large trees along Route 9 within 25 feet of the street. My applause there. And to just point out a couple things, the landscape plan, the plants in there are non-native plants. And we
We're talking about
require
that,
native
Jane.
plants in Southborough. And it still shows the juniper and references it on the plans, but that's been removed. And then there's a side and rear buffer required in our landscape bylaw. And take a look at the parking requirements of in the landscaping. There are trees required, and you may be able to meet them with existing trees that are already on the site, but you don't call any of them out. So I have no way of knowing whether they meet that or not. That's all I have. Do you have the letter for the extension?
I do. It's in the file, sorry.
Wait, just tell me the dates.
Oh,
No,
September 26th.
Yes, you want to continue the public hearing for major site plan approval to September 26th at 7:05 PM.
I thought we're extending the approval period.
Oh, the approval period to September 30th. 2022. That's the 4 days after the continued public hearing.
Madam Chair, I make a motion, we extend the public hearings to September 30th, 2022 for 250 Turnpike Road, change of use, storage facility, major site plan approval, as requested by the applicant.
Second,
So I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, Latrell, yes?
Mills, yes?
Stein, yes.
Houlihan, yes. Demiria, yes.
And okay,
Oh,
now the,
so that's closed or settled.
yeah,
So, Madam Chair, I make a motion, we continue the public hearing for 250 Turnpike Road, change of use, storage facility, major site plan approval to September 26, 2022 at 7:05 PM.
and a second.
Second,
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, Latrell, yes?
Mills, yes?
Stein, yes.
Houlihan, yes. Demiria, yes.
Very good. Thank you very much. See you in a couple of weeks.
Quinlan?
You-
Do
Have you guys seen the letter that,
the decision on the variance? Do you want a copy of it? I have extra copies, so.
Okay, the next item on the agenda. Public hearing for the warrant article for the tree protection bylaw. Do you have any update on that, Karina?
I do. I would like to point out that Jesse Stein submitted and filed with the town clerk a Mullins form for his absence at the August 22nd, 2022 public hearings for the tree bylaw warrant article. And then also, since the August 22nd planning board public hearing, which was the first one, we received an updated draft of the bylaw from Mimi, and that was distributed. And we also received a comments on the draft bylaw from National Grid, who were going to be in attendance this evening. So they may be in the Zoom attendee. Let me just see if they're there.
They're here in person.
Oh, they're there in person. Okay, excellent. Sorry, I can't see everything from here. Okay, and then, so we submitted, pretty much right after the last public hearing on the August 22nd, we submitted, the draft copy at that time to the town administrator for, him to put a draft copy into the warrant, for the select board to discuss. In the meantime, though, there has been an update provided by Mimi Luttrell for discussion this evening. And that brings us to tonight. Public hearing number 2. That's all, Mimi.
Okay, thank you very much. So I made some changes based on the comments that I received at the last hearing and from people in the public. Mainly section G, it was unclear. It seemed like anyone that requested a tree pruning or removal had to pay a application fee. And I made clear that that's not the case. If a tree's deemed to be dead or diseased, the tree warden can request a hearing and there's not a fee for the general public. The other area I just added to clarify that somebody who requests removal of a tree that isn't deemed to be dead or diseased or a hazard would then be responsible for holding the hearing and paying for the hearing and all the fees and replanting and those things. That's section H5.
Should we project those on here? So we can
Oh, yeah.
follow them?
Yeah.
And I'm happy to share my screen too. If you want me to designate Zoom and you can share up here.
Okay, yeah, that
That'd
sounds
be
great.
easier to just make me a co-host.
Right. And use the version from the Dropbox dated September 8th.
With the comments from National Grid.
Oh, yeah.
So Mimi, just to clarify, while they're doing that, section G, the changes, the revisions were to clarify that not all public shade tree pruning and removal requests are subject to a fee. Is that the newspaper fee or the application? Because we have no application fee right now.
Correct, but there
There will be.
there will be for those that want to remove a public shade tree for private purposes that are not deemed to be hazardous or,
Imminent hazard. Okay.
well,
Okay,
dead or diseased, terminally injured, interferes with structures, utilities, trees, sidewalks.
and that's because the tree warden could initiate that process.
Correct. But it was unclear previously.
Okay, and then the second part you said was section H5. It clarified who is responsible for expenses. That was the second one.
Yeah, so it clarified that someone who wants to remove a public shade tree for private purposes would be required to pay for advertising, the cost of removing the tree, planting sufficient replacements, police traffic details, repair of the streets, anything that's required in order to have that tree removed.
Okay, and
That's
that's
a
what
tree that's deemed to not meet the criteria for removal reached at a public hearing.
okay, and that's where you left off. So the next one was section J, you said?
Hold on, Karina. You ready?
Yeah, Karina, can you talk?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Don't hear.
Can you hear me? No?
Okay,
Nothing?
one more second. Sorry, guys. I just, I gotta do the flip. Can you talk now?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so too many people are not muted. More people have to mute. There you go.
How about now? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Is that better?
Thank you. That's much better. Yeah.
That's what husbands are for. Thanks, Kevin. All right.
So did we leave off at, we finished with section H? And now we're at section J, Mimi?
Where are we? So
She'll need just, you'll have to control. I think you have to talk in here now.
Oh, I have to talk in here.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh,
And this is what's,
That's
Up
on,
here.
no, she's.
this is displaying.
Yeah, so far we looked at section G, your revisions, and section H, 5.
H5.
Mhm.
Show the right version for the room.
H5, and just note that the purple highlighted are the comments related to National Grid, which I think you're gonna go back to once you do your revisions, right?
Yeah, I just update what the changes that I made and then we'll.
Okay, so
open
we're
it
at
up.
H5.
So you're not in the, is she in the most current one? Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yes.
All right. H.
There it is.
Okay, perfect. And then,
Section J,
so then J. So this so this was the discussion that over the replacement was getting to be a little crazy. So if a public shade tree is approved for removal by the tree warden at a consolidated hearing, then it's a 1-for-1. And then if someone removes one for private purposes, it's a 2-for-1. And it leaves it up to the select board and the planning board to determine a suitable alternative to the inch by inch or payment, or so it's not a requirement. It leaves it a little open to,
Discretion.
yeah.
And then the other changes you show is where you were just pointing out the tree warden is the select board.
Yeah,
Okay, so those were minor. So I think the next section is L3.
so that I took out the 90 days and added in the 23 is wrong, it's 22.3. That regulation that requires a plan prior to March 31st to municipalities. These are the annual maintenance and the annual hazard removal plans. Just to bring it in line with that.
So MGL says 90 days prior, no less than 90 days prior to the date of the utility proposed begin its work, and
Yeah.
You're making it a fixed date.
Yes,
Okay.
And what you're
then-
saying is per 220 CMR 22.3.
yeah,
Okay, so that just needs to be adjusted.
right.
Okay.
And that was it for your major revisions? Or not
Yes.
major, but, more significant revisions.
Yes,
Okay.
All right, 22.
yes. So any comments from the board, Mr. Mills?
I appreciate all the work you've been doing on this, and I think it's come a long way, and I think it's good to go. I don't have anything to add. And I again appreciate what you've done to get this to where it is.
Thank you. And Mr. Stein?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Mills. Great job, Mimi. And the warrant article looks good. Thank you.
Ms. Houlihan?
Thank you for the work. I'm comfortable with your changes. And I am interested after reviewing the National Grid comments, so I am interested to hear those as well. But I think the general gestalt of what we're trying to do is completely satisfied in this bylaw. Thank you.
Ms. DeMaria?
Yeah, thank you, Mimi. Yeah, I just want to say I also appreciate sorting out tree replacement. I think that's a really important part of this. It's not just removal, it's replacement in a way, I think it's really nice. It's reasonable. It makes the point, and I agree with your changes.
Okay. And is there any comment from the public?
You like me to approach the
Sure.
table?
This, maybe do this. Yeah, that's just a speaker, not a microphone. So hold on, bear with me. I'm gonna do this so you can see.
Thank you.
Yep. I'm just gonna, let me just, sorry, 1 second. Let me
Can folks
just
hear
get
me?
out of Here.
On the Zoom? Or is it just us in the room?
No, we
yeah.
can hear you on the Zoom as well, but you
Okay.
just need to identify yourself and your address.
Sure. Hi, Karina. Hi, good evening, members of the board. My name is Bob Moran. And I thank Chair Trell and the members of the board and Colleen for hearing National Grid's comments. And I also thank you for, quick recognition of the comments that were submitted pretty recently. So my role as a community manager is to serve the town of Southborough. I do work closely with the town administrator, with the DPW, fire and police, school department. And I'm here to express a little bit of concern with, what we see of the regulations. Obviously, we're not interested in, we recognize that you're very interested in the canopy of trees in Southborough.
Mr. Moran, can we just be clear? You are representing National Grid.
Yes, I'm sorry. I left
Okay,
that out.
just want to
Yeah.
make sure so the
Right.
audience and the public are aware of that. All right,
Sure.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So obviously, we recognize the interest in the tree canopy, and we're not suggesting, wholesale removal of trees. But it's important to note that we do have an obligation to serve customers and businesses in the community, and vegetation management is a part of that obligation. It's an important part. So I do have with me Dave Donahue, who is a professional arborist and 3 decades in forestry management. Also, Marissa Pizzi is an attorney who provided the comments that you were looking at previously.
Both
so-
with National Grid?
Both with National Grid. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we do have some operational, administrative, and maybe even legal concerns with some of the language that's proposed. And the objective tonight is not to be adverse, but rather to demonstrate a willingness to, work with the town and hopefully develop a framework that provides a reasonable way for us to maintain the obligation that we have to keep the lights on. Really, that's what it comes down to. We do want to put on record our concerns. I think that's happening. And recognize that vegetation management does have an impact on reliability. And, in emergency situations, it has impacts on public safety. And the safety and well-being of your first responders and our employees as well. So with that, I'd like to ask Marissa to come up as well. And introduce yourself. You're from National Grid, yes.
Yes. Good evening, members of the board. Thank you. My name is Marissa Pizzi. As Bob indicated, I am an attorney with National Grid. And I also, I apologize, I'm going to need my reading glasses here, but I also want to thank the board for the opportunity to share our comments this evening. As Bob mentioned, I think this bylaw will have a direct impact on our ability as a public utility to do work in the town and respond to emergency situations. And we really do appreciate the opportunity to be a part of the discussion. Our interest is really in making sure that from a utility perspective, the bylaw is easy to understand so that we understand what the obligations are on us, that it's efficient, and also that it's consistent with the state law, which, I think as drafted, I can see that you've tracked or at least attempted to do so, the provisions in the state statute. So with that, I guess if it's okay with the board members, I thought I would just kind of quickly or briefly, I guess, address what the comments are. I understand that you'll probably want to, get your town council's input on those comments, but if it's helpful and okay with the board, I can address those comments. Sure.
Are you familiar with that?
Am I?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm showing on there, if you want to scroll through it on that.
Ah, sure.
Then people can actually watch it with you.
Okay.
And there's a-
I can just. Yeah, I might just need help with this. If you show me how to do the scrolling, yeah.
Even Bob, I can really operate it.
Great too. So just 2 fingers.
Yeah, you just scroll up
My
and
kids
down.
all the time
Yeah.
telling me use 2 fingers.
Um,
Okay, so I can start with I was gonna start with section L just since that, and if you don't, I know it's a
Yeah.
little bit out of order, but I think sort of where the bulk of our comments.
just show your comments.
Okay, thank you. So I think our comments really are in 3 sections of the bylaw and primarily in K and L. And I think we also had one comment in section H. And I thought I'd start with section L, which concerns a utilities vegetation management activities, since I think that is the section that most directly impacts us and where most of our comments are. I guess at the outset, I just want to emphasize that our company does comply with Chapter 87, Section 14 in other municipalities, and we do have experience with that statute, and we don't object to complying with that statute and providing required vegetation management plans on an annual basis. I think our main concern with the bylaw as drafted is the public hearing requirements that are referenced in subsections, I think it's 5, 6, and 7, which we view to be in conflict with the statute, and specifically section 14, which exempts utilities from public hearing requirements set forth in sections 3 and 5 of Chapter 87, when the work is part of an approved vegetation management plan or hazard tree removal plan. Again, from our perspective, one of the main points and really, I guess, benefits of section 14 from a utilities perspective is that it does not require a utility to submit to a public hearing if the utility submits an annual vegetation management plan or annual hazard tree removal plan. And I think, in fact, the purpose and intent of section 14 when it was adopted was to streamline the process for utilities when specifically dealing with these types of vegetation management activities. So fully acknowledging that, public shade tree removals, when not part of a vegetation management plan or hazard tree removal plan, may be subject to the public hearing requirements under section 3 and 5 of the statute and of your bylaw. We acknowledge that. But I think, again, in our interpretation, the main point of section 14 of the statute is to exempt utilities from those requirements, again, to sort of have a more efficient process for these types of activities, which Bob mentioned are really critical to our ability to ensure reliability. And again, that's not to say that we wouldn't expect, and in other towns we do have, and Dave could probably speak to this, that there would be some administrative review and discussion with whether it's the tree warden or perhaps members of your board. But that typically would happen in an administrative review process and not as part of a public hearing that then triggers all of the requirements, I think, per section 8 of your bylaw. So that's really the main comment we have on section L. I think the other minor point to make on section L, which is small, but I think an important one, and I'll see if I can. Oh, sure.
So the public hearing process to review the annual maintenance and hazard tree removal plans is between the select board and it's not the utilities expected to.
Mimi, it's difficult to hear you, just so you know, if you could just speak.
Because under 87 section 14, the tree warden approves with conditions the annual maintenance plans and the hazard tree removal plans. Our tree warden is our select board.
Yeah, understand that. So I don't think I realized that was the intent. Although I guess it troubles me that there would be a public hearing to discuss a plan that that we as the utility wouldn't be present at. I realize we could be, but I think the way the bylaw is written and the way I read it, it refers to, I think in section L, that there will be a public hearing and it refers back to H, the public hearing requirements. And then the public hearing section is really the shade tree removal public hearing. It references sections 3 of the statute. And again, I think section 14 specifically says that the utility is exempt from sections 3 and 5. So it just troubles me, I guess, because it seems like it sort of defeats, I think, the exemption if there's going to be a public hearing by the tree warden, which is the select board, and arguably consolidated with your board, on the very plan where the statute says we're exempt from those hearing requirements. So I guess that's where I think our concern lies.
See, the statute says you're exempt from the hearings if you haven't approved it.
Correct.
So this is just a hearing amongst the town to give transparency to these plans. We've never had approved plans before, in my.
Right, I think that's, I
Yeah,
think we acknowledge that,
maybe
yeah.
Dave could speak to that. I think there is a demonstrated long history of working closely in all the towns that we work with the tree wardens. Yeah,
Ever received an
Yeah.
annual plan.
Yeah,
Not. Or the town, we were not asked. DPW supervisor, she said they don't have. approved.
and
Just trying to have some transparency.
And I think, like I said, understood, and certainly we have no objection to review of plans, understanding that various town, officials, maybe board members would want to have input. I think for us, and maybe it's a lack of understanding how the public hearing would function. There are the notice requirements, for instance, require, I think, posting on each tree. The public hearing requirements under section H, which I think arguably would require our folks to be involved as part of that process. And so it does put obligations on the utility that presently aren't on the utility that I think the utility was intended to be exempt from under the statute. And so I think any additional process that potentially delays this important work is of concern to us. It's not, as Bob said, an attempt to, not wanting to hear concerns or not wanting to discuss what the plan is. I mean, obviously, the statute does contemplate approval of a plan with modifications, and we would expect there to be some back and forth. I think the public hearing requirement adds a layer of process that potentially delays this type of work, which is very different than I think when you're talking about, we may have a capital project where we need to remove trees, and that's entirely different. We would come to you and we would expect to be before potentially the select board and the planning board if it was a consolidated hearing for removal of those trees. And we've done that in other towns, but we've never, as far as I know, and I think, Dave, you could correct me if I'm wrong, in every municipality where we are subject to the statute, where they have asked us for annual vegetation management plans, they've never had a public hearing for that process. And so that's something to us that we've just not had to do, that we view as outside of section 14. And that I think our really main concern is that puts a lot of extra burdens on the company to comply and to again, potentially delaying that work. So
and I
that's,
think it also places a burden on the town to coordinate those hearings if it were to go that way. There's an administrative concern, and the idea that a tree hearing could be a particular situation could be discussed and we would not necessarily be present, is a concern as well.
Could I make a comment, Mimi? Sure. So I just want to recap for the planning board members that we did submit a question to town council back in July, where we asked, we are looking for National Grid to submit a yearly vegetation management plan that can have a consolidated hearing for the scenic roads on their plan all at once, just once a year, and then they're good to go. Town council responded, and I'll just read certain aspects. The statute applies to maintenance of a road that includes cutting and removing of trees within a scenic road right of way. In my opinion, trimming of trees that are within the right of way constitutes maintenance of such a right of way. Accordingly, statute applies. I think that the plan to employ a yearly management plan for scenic roads to be reviewed by the planning board is sensible and fair. So I just wanted to remind you that that was feedback we did get from town council. And my impression is that the consolidated hearing once a year for the vegetation management plans was an acceptable process. And so I just wanted not to forget that legal opinion.
So thanks for coming, appreciate it, good discussion.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to make sure it's clear in my head. I'm hearing that we never had a vegetation plan in the past that approved. from what we were
To my
doing
knowledge,
in
up to this, to my knowledge, up to this point, has generally been an ad hoc and less formal interaction with tree wardens and DPW folks. Yeah,
Okay, so
but maybe not filed formally. Yeah.
Sure. So,
Yeah.
so you can see from our perspective, we're trying to just make it more formalized and so, more aware of what's happening to the townspeople, because what happens is people come in here and it's like, hey, this tree has been here forever, and all of a sudden it's gone. I go to DPW, they say, oh, well, so-and-so took it down, it was in their plan, no one had a plan, like, they said it was dead, and it's all, no one knows. So this is what we're trying to stop. We're trying to get people to go, well, that was on the plan. If so, I think we're trying to make something mindful of it, so that, not really obstruct the work you have to do. I don't want my colleagues to know. So like using my generator to forget how to turn the thing off. But anyway, so I think we want to be able to say, give us a plan that we've never seen, or the town hasn't seen in the past. We can work together, and there'll be one meeting that we all go through and say, okay, yep, that's right. Okay. And then you'd be exempt from other ones going forward if we agree upon the plan itself. In terms of, I think they're looking to say that you don't have to post a tree.
We're having a little difficulty hearing you, Andrew. If you could just speak up just a little bit.
Oh, so we turned around backwards.
So they.
There we go. Wow, nice catch.
So if you submitted the plan and there was only one meeting that you had to come to and say, hey, any questions on the plan were reviewed, and it was with the selectmen and the tree warden and maybe the planning board, and then it was over, are you open to that?
So I don't
Because
know that I can speak. I don't know that I can answer that question without consulting with vegetation management, who impacts most directly. I mean, I still think from a legal perspective that would be contrary to the exemption of the statute.
Well,
You
how
know,
does
whether
the
we
plan,
agree
how's
to-
the plan get approved? If
So
you
there would
just
be an
submit one?
administrative review process. I think that's where I think, and that's the point I think I want to emphasize, is that we're not opposed to a review of the plan. I mean, we fully understand that you're not going to just rubber stamp the plan and say, okay, go off and do your work. I mean, there's an administrative review that would happen, and there might be meetings, with you could have a public meeting. I think a public meeting and a public hearing are two different things, and you're gonna have a public meeting, it would seem to me that I guess I question but I don't know if this is something that town council weighed in on. I mean, to have a public hearing where we wouldn't be present, to me, seems to be there's a lack of, I think, due process in there somewhere. We
Well-
need to be present, and so now it's a mandated public hearing, which the statute says we're exempt from. So I don't want to put form over substance. I mean, I think that's where I'm getting stuck on, is that it's a public hearing. If you want to have a public meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the planning board to
Huh.
review the plan, I think
So,
that's up to you guys.
In other towns, how do you get approval of the plan?
I'm gonna ask probably Dave to talk about this, but from what I understand, there are discussions that happen informally, maybe in a more public meeting context. You wanna come up?
Also, I want to point out that the exemption in chapter 87, section 14, if I'm not mistaken, refers to exempt from requirements of section 3 and 5. But that is when you're not on a scenic road. right? The difference here is if you're on a scenic road, I don't think you need a consolidated public hearing with the planning board and the select board if it's not on a scenic road. And maybe I'm missing the point here, but I think the exemption is for, tell me if I'm wrong, it doesn't exempt the scenic road public hearing.
Well, I guess yeah, and I appreciate, I think that question, and the way section L is written it calls for a consolidated public hearing just in every case. It doesn't say only for work on scenic roads. I think that language comes up in section 8 of your section H, excuse me, of your bylaw. So I think section L is written would require consolidated hearing annually, every time we submit a plan, there would have to be a consolidated public hearing for review of the plan. The scenic road aspect of that, I acknowledge, I think complicates things. I interpret the scenic road statute differently than does town council. I think his opinion, as I understand it, is that if you're doing work on a scenic road or intending to remove trees on a scenic road, then that's subject to planning board hearing. The statute doesn't quite read that way. It says when you're removing or cutting trees that involves repair, maintenance, paving, there has to be some other road work happening that would trigger, as I read the statute, and I'm pretty
And
sure.
town council opined that did not opine in that direction. Town
And
council
I
felt that
appreciate
if
that.
it was in the right of way, then maintenance in the right of way is maintenance in the right of way. It doesn't just involve the paved portion of the right of way. So just so the public understands, that was the clarity.
And I think that piece of it, I don't disagree with. But the statute talks about any repair, maintenance, reconstruction, or paving with respect to a scenic road shall not include cutting or removal of trees. And so if the removal of the trees is the maintenance, then the language is redundant and you wouldn't need to say it. So I don't interpret it in the same fashion, but I think putting that aside, because section H of the bylaw, which governs public shade tree hearings in general. That was the one comment I had there, and I don't interpret it the same way, but I think that's a different issue than when you're talking about vegetation management activities. And I think the statute, again, under section 14, it would defeat the purpose of the exemption if we were to say that you could have certain public hearings in order to approve the plan, but not others. I think the purpose of that statute that exemption was pretty clear. It exempts a utility from the requirements of sections 3 and 5. One of the requirements of section 3 is the public hearing. It's also the section that talks about consolidated public hearing with the planning board if there's work in connection with a scenic road. That to me is all exempt under section 14. And that, I think that is our primary concern, not so much when we're talking about these other projects that we might have in town, or if we get a call on a random tree. It's the vegetation management work that we do, and Dave can speak to this. And I know you had a question about how typically that work gets approved in other towns where they have the statute.
You want to introduce yourself, Dave?
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. My name is Dave Donahue. I'm the forestry supervisor for National Grid, and I oversee the work here in Southborough. I've been working in Southborough since 2007. So I've been here a while, and I've had a great relationship, I believe, with the tree wardens and the town here. My opinion. But you asked a question about, so in the past experience, we will notify the tree warden ahead of time, verbally, and if they've asked us, we provided the circuit maps. Our specifications haven't changed at National Grid for our distribution lines for about 20 years. So for the most part, what we've been doing back in 2007 and 8 is very similar to what we're doing now in 2022.
So you just reach out to them. That doesn't sound like a plan to me.
No, it is.
So, no,
It's a
no.
relationship.
I
yeah.
I
More
will,
of a relationship.
we will notify the Southborough tree warden. In the past, it was Dick Rock and it's been Chris Leroy. So I will call Chris and let him know what we have coming up for work. And I usually share with him circuit maps, just like I've done recently. And the circuit maps will cover the outline of where our maintenance work will be on those roads.
And Dave, just a question, clarifying question, does that transmittal or that interaction include our standards?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
does, it
which-
does.
Yeah,
But I think you gotta take a step back.
Yeah,
What-
I understand what
when
you're
I
asking.
understand what the yearly, vegetation management plan, I would think it'd be all mapped out. So this is what we're gonna do for 3 months, we're gonna get this out of the town.
And-
These are the trees we're gonna take care of, anything that touches the wires, blah, 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 something like that. And then the next, this is what's gonna happen, not a relationship that is, and no,
I'm just-
I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm,
This is what I think.
The past practice, I think,
Yes,
is what
yes.
Dave's speaking about, and
yes,
Um,
no, I'm not, I'm just saying this is what happened in the past,
Yeah.
and that's been accepted and approved by the tree warden.
Yeah.
That's how we did our business. And so we've had a plan and we've had specifications, so we just don't send tree crews out and go trimming any particular tree.
to your, I think, maybe specific question, we did. Was it actually just last week?
Yeah.
Mark Purple had reached out. We've been sort of having, I think, a separate dialogue, trying to get this year's vegetation management work underway, obviously in the absence of any town bylaw. And there's been discussions with Chris Leroy, with Karen Galligan, and most recently Mark Purple, who did requests of us our annual tree vegetation management plan. We did provide that last Friday, I think, so it was just provided. And it does include a summary, I think, of the type maybe that you're asking about in addition to the circuit maps and all of that information.
State the trees you're gonna take.
When you say state the trees, like the
You
specific,
said
this
the
tree
summary.
on this street,
I think, again, what we're trying to get away from is someone saying, "Hey, there's been a 100-year-old tree at the corner of my street forever, and all of a sudden it's gone without, any notice." Like, would that be in your summary of what the yearly vegetation?
are you asking if a specific tree on a specific street? Like, do we identify the tree by this tree on this street has to be removed? Is that what you're asking with that level of specificity? Because I think our vegetation management plans typically include the standards, right, for which we might need to remove a tree.
Yeah, so we have standards that,
So it wouldn't be,
Streets, yeah.
yeah,
I'd like to be clear on something just quickly here so that the planning board understands, and you can tell me if I'm misrepresenting this, but when you submit the plans so far that I have seen, that I believe you're calling them the circuit plans, they are basically a street map with a dashed line indicating the routes along the street or across country of which you'll be providing maintenance on these trees. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, and I'm done.
That doesn't speak to specific trees.
so I'll let Dave speak to this. We don't have an annual hazard tree removal plan, so we would expect for hazard tree removals that we don't have an approved plan for, that we would need to treat those on a case by case basis outside of, well, if it's an emergency is one thing versus, I guess, if it's not an emergency, might
the way our
Dealt
hazardous
with
tree
through your.
plan would
bylaw.
originate is from what we've encountered upon our maintenance plan. So it's the maintenance plan that comes first. We don't have a hazard tree plan created because we haven't identified any hazard trees that we've targeted, we haven't identified anything. So the way our plan typically works is through our maintenance specifications, which identify the types of brush and species that we would normally remove under our power lines. That's the brush. It is diameter brush that is under 8 inches and it's over 1.5 inches. And that's what our specifications have been at National Grid in Massachusetts for about 20 years. This is a revision here from 2019.
It's what, under 8 inches?
Yeah, if in our specification, we do call out for trees that are under 8-inch diameter, under our power lines, in unmaintained areas to be removed. So that's primarily under the power lines and in the utility corridor. And that's in,
I'm sorry, we can't hear. Is that Debbie speaking?
Yeah.
We can't hear you at all, Debbie.
Gotta yell.
I'm wondering if you have a policy on mature trees. I just want to let you know, the state of our trees in Southborough is really bad. And I don't know if any of you have driven down the roads recently, but there's a number of very large mature trees in town that are topped at the top, so they're killed and they're still standing. And those represent the history of this town. On my street alone and the surrounding town streets, there's maybe 15 to 20 of those. And I believe that it's National Grid that cuts them, but I'm not sure. And, you know, I'm wondering, how does that happen? So when Mr. Mills says, you know, you go to work and you come back and your favorite tree is gone, that's really shocking to a lot of people in town. It's also really disturbing. And I'm wondering, how many years out are you looking at these trees and saying, any one particular tree, not this kind of map, but saying, you know, that tree is getting too close to the wires. I need to speak to somebody about trimming it or something. Where does that happen? Because what we're seeing are topped trees, and of course, they're being killed. So our oldest tree, we've got 4, 5, and even 6 foot diameter trees. I don't know if National Grid did those, but I was told, at least on some of them, that they're done by National Grid. So we're trying to have a more public process so that this doesn't happen. It's not the 1.5 inch to 8 inch brush. I think we totally understand that that's going to interfere with power lines, but a mature tree that's 4, 5, 6 feet in diameter, that's just completely taken from the crown is completely taken off, and the butt is standing 20 feet high in the air. We pass it every single day when we drive home, and we wonder, was that even a diseased tree? Or did National Grid take that down for the wires? Or what happened there? So we're trying to figure out for any one particular tree, what's your process on that? And how do you come to cut one down like that?
that kind of work doesn't happen. That is not something that we do. So we don't do that intentionally. There are some trees there that would be under power lines that might, for some reason, get pruned in a way that it does look like it was topped and not cut to the bottom. But as far as a large 5 to 6 foot, big diameter, significant stately tree, we don't do that. That's not good arboricultural work. And there could be reasons why the tree might look like that. And I'd have to say, you know, there are other utilities out there that will do some cutting for certain reasons. I don't know exactly why. We don't do that to healthy trees. So I believe we have been transparent in town with our line clearance tree crews and the town. Some trees are damaged by storm and they are broken, and a lot of people don't see that. Sometimes at night, things do happen. I get a lot of phone calls about trees that have been affected by something. And we might be asked to come repair and make things restore the power, clean up a broken branch, broken limb, top of the tree, and it might have been left. So there are reasons for probably those situations, but that's not what we do.
So then what I'm hearing, your plan is basically gonna say anything that's 8 inches or less would be in your purview when you say, hey, we're coming down this section of town. This is what we're gonna cut, and any brush that is not being maintained or it's not on someone's property and it's starting to come up. Those are the only things you're gonna focus on in your plan, your yearly vegetation plan. Is that right?
Well, we do want to manage brush that is under our power lines, yes,
Right.
so we will remove that brush.
So only 8-inch trees and brush, that's all you're gonna touch.
In the utility corridor, and we will be doing our trimming above too. Part of our pruning is maintaining branches and growth from the sides of the wires and above the wires. So we
So if
have,
it's a side one though, you're just gonna cut branches, you're not gonna take down the tree.
correct,
And if it's within how many feet of the wires?
in a maintained area, it's 6 feet of side clearance, and in a wooded area, it's 10 feet above. So we're trying to maintain overhang.
Yeah. So if it's like,
We're gonna get the side.
if it's along the reservoir where you have the massive big power lines, it's feeding somewhere else, maybe those aren't even yours. But if it's not the regular ones, like the telephone poles along the street, if it's somewhere else, like, you're saying you do 10.
There's a difference between transmission and distribution. I think you're referencing transmission, the taller towers. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a different.
Is that the 10 feet one, or is that?
No,
No, you don't do
on
those.
the street, it would be about 10 feet of overhang and 15 feet in a wooded area. So there's parts of.
I thought you said 6 feet.
That's
on the
6
street.
feet to the sides, so we want to try to get a minimum amount of clearance from the side of our power lines and above. So, and that is, and to kind of go back, is you're on a 5-year trimming cycle. So, when I was sitting back there in the chair, we're not here in Southborough every year for maintenance work. We could be here in Southborough in 2 years with about 4 circuits that we'd like to prune. And it could be a bigger amount of work. This year, there's a certain amount of work. Next year, there could be nothing in Southborough, nothing scheduled, because we don't have circuits that are on that 5-year cycle. So this year, we happen to have 3 circuits, which I submitted. I submitted 3 circuit maps. They go into different parts of town. And the reason that they're due this year is because most likely they were pruned out 5 years ago.
I gotta say, it's enlightening to me.
Yeah.
It's not anything I've heard before. Not saying it's not true or anything, I'm just saying it's enlightening to me. It's
I'm happy
contradicts
personally to share what we do. And,
No,
you know,
this is,
Yeah, it's very
and this is, yeah, very helpful. I'm saying that in a good way. It's
Yeah.
enlightening to me.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
To engage. I would also want to make the point, and I apologize for moving the screen back and forth, but I think it helps. So I do want to make the point that the trimming that we're talking about is generally separate from what I would call emergent requests, which would be, from fire and police, storm related, and even just customer work. And I can say that in checking the records over the last, since the beginning of the year, there've been 47 calls from fire and police for tree trim removal. And there's been 25 customer requests as well. So, and frankly, this is a light year. It's not been a lot of storms. I'm sorry, I just jinxed it, but yeah. So, it has been a sort of a light year for storms thus far, and we don't want to lose sight of the emergent work that we do get just on a day-to-day basis. It's averaging 1 or 2 calls a week anyways in Southborough.
To go back to the hearing on the plan. The calls that you receive from Southborough that are not from police and fire safety.
Yeah.
Private owners, how do you adjudicate if it's a public shade tree? What do you do in that case if it's not on a wire? It's just tree work.
Well, it would be on a wire in that case.
So it's only if it's hazard. Is that correct?
Yeah.
We do get a lot of calls from residents that come into the National Grid Customer Service Center. And they'll get the information from the customer and the address that gets pulled up, and we know who it is calling from whatever road in Southborough. So it'll have a description of the caller's comments, and we will follow up with that, because most of them are customers calling about wires overgrown or a broken branch. So a lot of the homeowners, customers, residents are helping us kind of also get out into Southborough to see what the conditions are. They see a lot of things that we just don't know about. And some of them are broken branches that might be hung up that no one has seen yet, but it's out by their mailbox. Some of them are dangled into the phone line or cable TV or right by an intersection. And so in the past, well, our practice would be we'll get back to the customer and explain to them what it is we found. A phone call, meet them at the house, maybe leave a card at the door. If it does require a tree crew to come up there because it's a branch, or if it's been urgent enough and their concern is definitely warranted where we should act soon, we'll send a tree crew up to clear up the situation.
I can tell you, I used to have one supporting cable that went from one pole to another. And I had a tree guy out doing other pruning. I was like, can you take care of that? Because I could see it was lying on the cable. And he's like, no, I can't touch that. You gotta pull much to grid.
But I think you usually contact Chris Leroy when
Yes.
you're gonna be in.
Yeah.
Because I know I've been contacted on some imminent hazard trees over the past 6 months or so.
We've been trying to notify Chris as much as we can. He's my first point of contact, and just like all the other towns that I work in, I would go to the Westboro tree warden, the same thing, especially if it's pretty significant.
So I guess I'm just gonna ask the question, does that now warrant notifying the Board of Selectmen? If the selectmen are the tree warden? So
So
I,
Chris does. So I don't think that, yeah,
Yeah, I think maybe this goes to, I think the one sort of comment we had in section K, which was your emergency removal provisions, is that we were concerned, I think, with what Dave's just describing, is that it doesn't seem to provide a mechanism for National Grid to respond to these situations in a timely manner, in a timely manner if it's truly an emergency. There's two different provisions which I'm not sure how they were meant to work together. I know K1 and K3. K1 talks about the emergency response official making the tree, the imminent tree hazard determination, and then K3 talks about it being the tree warden designee in consultation with the town administrator and town planner. But in either case, we might receive these calls as Dave indicated,
middle of the
we're
night.
in the middle of the night. I mean, there might be a tree on a wire, and to sort of have to navigate now through different channels to address those situations. The bylaw doesn't really seem to provide a mechanism for us to deal with those. So that was a concern. That was one concern.
Well, it was my impression that emergency removal is different from maintenance removal or trimming.
Correct.
Yeah.
But I think even under the emergency provision of the bylaw, it talks about, as I said, I think K1 by a determination being made by emergency response officials. So I'm not sure who that's meant to be. And I don't know whether they may or may not be on the scene if we need to do something. It just creates some sort of public safety concerns we have, as well as some reliability concerns if we're not able to act in a timely manner with some of these. I mean, they're not all emergencies, but the ones that are, that concerns us.
And I guess I might summarize some of the discussions with the general point that anything that slows our ability to, clear and resolve tree trimming, pruning, whatever's involved, especially in emergency conditions, negatively impacts reliability to your customers, to your residents, negatively impacts public safety, negatively potentially impacts first responders. You're gonna have fire and police on the scene, and if we're waiting for another emergency response official to determine whether the tree is dead or endangered, I can just see it being very problematic and introducing delays that, we would feel it would be unnecessary. We want to get your customers back online.
So also it's my impression that if you have a hazard management plan, right, I would guess that hazard management plan that you submit once a year describes how you handle the process of imminent emergency tree removal or imminent hazardous tree removal, right? So you would have, once a year, you submit a plan indicating when we have an emergency tree, this is our process. When we have an emergency and a tree has to be handled immediately, this is our process. But then when you have the maintenance, the vegetative maintenance plan, that's maintenance, that's ongoing maintenance to keep trees clear of the lines. Not that something fell on them, that would be an emergency, but you want to make sure that trees don't constantly grow onto the lines and around. So it's like mowing a lawn. You come through and you kind of trim the trees away from where they're getting too close within the setbacks of the power lines. So if that plan is submitted once a year, because you know what your circuits are, and for those circuits that include scenic roads, you would then have a public hearing with the planning board and the tree warden for those specific trees. Everything else is handled directly with the tree warden. But I just want to point out that you may be concerned with a butter notification, but it's my understanding that town council has clarified to us in the planning department, at least, that scenic road tree removal public hearings only require the newspaper ad. You don't have to notify the abutters in certified return receipt. And Colleen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because Colleen was working on this. So if you have a circuit plan, you know where you're going, you know if there are scenic roads involved, you have a public hearing with the planning board once a year for those roads that are on scenic roads, so they understand, they have a chance to go walk those streets with your representative and say, please be careful of this tree, and this tree. We would like to preserve these. And it kind of like would handle that process. A once a year public hearing, you know where you want to do your maintenance. The planning board gets to see where you're going. Someone's willing to walk the circuit with you on those scenic roads and just point out the trees that they want to preserve and not just, chop. So that's my impression. I just didn't want that to be missed, because I think there's two things going on here. There's hazardous trees and there's trees and brush you want to maintain regularly, like mowing the lawn.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Karina. One comment that I might have in that area is I would hate to take the decision out of the hands of an experienced trouble person, a trouble worker who's faced with, being up in the air and dealing with trees and wires. And, generally the best decision is usually made in the field rather than wait a period of time and consult others out, not even at the site. I'm a believer, long time with the utility, that the best decisions are made right at the place where the work is being done. And
Are the people in the field arborists? Is there an arborist with the crew when they're doing these,
not
just making
necessarily,
these?
but they're certainly trained in that. Yeah.
Well, they're experienced line clearance contractors, so they do have experience doing that work. We don't have a process a plan that says how we're going to respond in an emergency situation.
I don't think we're trying to stop. or even control. I think we're all in agreement that, it's the middle of the night, there's some storm and power's out for, X number of people.
Mhm.
You guys are gonna do what you need to do.
Yeah.
So, wouldn't that?
That's gonna happen.
Response, if the tree fell in the middle of the night and power.
And if you have to trim another one next to it or something like that, that's gonna happen. I think, at least for me, I'm 100% sure. That's just gonna. It's the tree that is on Flag Road that a couple of years ago, again, it's like 4 feet wide or diameter or something. That got taken down. That I don't even think was on the side of the road with power lines, that the stump is still sitting there, and we were told, I was told that, oh, that was National Grid took that down for us and they topped it and everything, we have to take the rest. That's what we were told. Like, why?
I know that's right.
So
I
that,
think
so
you may have been the fall guys on
Yeah.
a few things.
That's not what we did, but
I think one,
you gotta touch that thing?
we were asked to prune those branches back because the power lines are across the street. And it did have dead branches that extended out, and that's what we did. We brought those branches back. They were dead over the road and over the wires.
And
That's all we
endanger
did,
public safety.
But then the rest of it then is gone.
not by us.
Okay.
So,
But
yeah,
see,
that goes,
now you see.
not by
Yeah.
us.
So it's not the little trees.
I-
and everything, so.
I know some of these trees intimately in town. I really do. I love
So you see
trees.
why People are upset about it.
Yeah, and I went to school for trees. I love trees. I love doing what I'm doing. I don't, and Karina, I wanted to just mention, so our list of hazardous trees, bad trees, structurally deficient trees, cracked trees, dead trees. We can all say that they're risky and they're high hazard. That list of trees is put together. We do not want to remove anything that's doing great, strong, healthy trees. We're a partner. These trees are fine. We want to maintain those healthy trees around our wires so we can, for restoration, for visibility, we have some clearance and they're not overgrown, and for reliability. But we won't be presenting a list of trees to be removed that are viable trees. They're on our list for a reason, and we want to. That'll be all transparent, and I believe it has been. We always prepare a list of trees, and we just don't come into town with tree crews to start cutting. We've never done that, and we never will.
But, yeah, I don't think that the breakdown of communication is on your side.
Sorry, Mimi, we can't hear you. Sorry.
I don't think the breakdown in communication was National Grid's part. I think that the breakdown is within the town, and that's what we're trying to clarify with this bylaw, so everybody knows who to speak to who, so things don't, when something happens, everybody knows why, and there's not that tree on Flag Road happening. So just, if we can get back to the bylaw. So on section L, it's the public hearing. If it was a public meeting, you would be more comfortable with that?
I don't think I don't think I would have any objection to a public meeting if that's sort of, I think how the town chooses to administratively review the plan is really up to the town.
Would the board have any issue with changing that wording?
Yeah, I guess I'm stuck on the process, right? So you guys are gonna submit a plan. It's gonna say, hopefully, so you don't become, maybe it's words, the fall guy or something again. If it's just like, hey, we're gonna stick to 8-inch trees and any brush, and we're just gonna prune trees within 6 feet. And we're gonna go down this corridor, that corridor, and if we find something that's dead, we're gonna notify the tree warden, we're gonna mark it, and then it would be a public hearing or something. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
like, not dead, but like a concerned tree that maybe not this year, but we're worried about it in the future, that, you know, that you're looking at, that you're like, all right, this is something that we can then kind of get ahead of. That's, I think that's the gist of what we're trying to do.
Even as the trees we present, we will be able to defend or just support why it's on our list, what we're concerned about.
Yeah. So I think that's, so again, from a process standpoint, I think if that's what your annual yearly vegetation management plan says, and this is what we're gonna do. You know, I think it's a layup on this side. Yeah. Go at it, right? And then when the tree does come down, we can then go to whoever and say, hey, what happened? This wasn't on the plan, you know, this wasn't agreed to. National Grid didn't say they were this. You know, what happened? And we can start getting hold people more accountable to what's actually going on and make sure that those big massive trees that everyone loves don't disappear.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair, and I think you can get sort of a flavor for what the plan is. If it hasn't, it sounds like maybe you do have it, but if it hasn't been forwarded, I can. Okay, I'm happy to forward it to you. In fairness, it did just go to Mr. Purple on Friday, so I don't, for all I know, he may have, I don't think you heard back from him, so we don't know that he actually received it, but I'm happy to forward it to you tomorrow, and you can get a sense of what. I mean, I imagine that's typically what we would submit on any given year, that we would have to submit a plan, something like that. And so, you know, until this bylaw becomes adopted in any event, you'll have a sense of what that plan would look like. So I'll do that tomorrow. I can forward it.
It's the same plan that you gave me the applications for from Karen. This is what I have up on this.
Yeah, that hasn't changed.
So the-
So the maps are the same. We call them circuit maps. There were 3 of them. And I
Yes.
think I'd highlighted the roads. And I think Karen on their application, she listed the road names. That was, she pulled the names of the roads and put them on the bottom. Yeah,
Colleen, could you share that screen with the Zoom people,
so,
please?
Colleen, this was the earlier, okay.
But,
This is a little different from what you submitted to Mark.
Yeah, this isn't, yeah, and I think just for the record, this isn't exactly what was submitted to Mr. Purple. The circuit maps would be the same. There was a narrative summary of the quote unquote plan, which I think is what you don't, is the key piece that you don't have, that sets out what the standards are that we would follow. That I think, was that, okay, so.
everything you just said is good.
Okay, well, the standards, yes, I'm sorry, that's a separate document, but there is also a Word document that would lay out our plan, in addition to the standards that was submitted on Friday. So I'll send the whole thing over. I don't want to take the discussion. I know you were about away from the bylaw, but that would typically be what we would submit. Going forward, at least, what we would plan to submit.
And then the other was on the emergency tree removal, which there's no intention to start any, anyone has an emergency trees. And my interpretation is if you're called about a tree down on line, if that's an emergency response. So I don't think that it will inhibit your ability to
Okay.
do that. I don't know that the board.
Just a question, is there standard language for those towns that you do have this process? And there are other bylaws that, because we haven't constructed this from ourselves, we've kind of used from other towns. So is it a separate language element that speaks specifically to the utility company? Would it just be resolved by adding one comment that the utility company is considered in an emergency response and designated?
I think it could be. I'd have to look at, I'm not sure whether in the towns we do comply with section 14, if there's a specific bylaw in place. I'd have to look at that, or whether we're just being asked, verbally, like Mr. Purple did, send in your plan and we send it in. And I think that's probably more likely to be the case. I can look into that, but I think either way, I do think that this could be modified to include some kind of I guess, however you want to word it, modification or just to acknowledge those situations so that we're not viewed to be in violation if some, if we do need to go out and deal with an emergency. We're not necessarily waiting for consultation with the town administrator or the town planner in those instances that it is a
Public
true
safety,
emergency, right?
Absolutely. I think that makes sense, that we see if there's some language that might just be able to modify, or we specifically call out that they are a official.
Yeah.
And are they?
How about including utilities?
Yeah, the question is, with that 14-day calendar day of determination, is that language? Do they have to submit it to the tree warden? Like, it's an emergency situation.
Just so the tree warden knows what happens,
Right.
Not prior to,
And is that part of the
not
process?
prior to remedying the.
You had mentioned that.
Yeah.
We would not typically submit, right?
We don't, I'm not aware of anything in a lot of towns like this. They may have something that I just haven't seen. But there might be times where maybe I can't get a hold of Chris. And there is an emergency in town during the day, and we just have to, we have police there and we have other officials there. And it's pretty cut and dry, so to speak. We just have to act. So we almost need that. I'm not asking for the authority, but we will have to respond.
I think that, yeah, I think
It's just reporting back afterwards, so we know.
Well, I think that's the
Yeah.
question, right? Because I don't think we do. I don't think we do that presently, and
No.
I don't know what ability we
So
do
we
have
tell
to.
Chris if we came into town and took down a windows.
If it was a broken, we might tell him if it was usually something significant, maybe a broken branch or limb.
In the course of our day-to-day relationship with them.
Yeah,
And
we will, he knows about it, but Chris is, for a lot of times he knows when we're there, or he hears about the situation. Or he was there. A lot of times he's there.
I mean, I guess what a question maybe here is when you say written record, are we talking about notification really? I mean, just to let the town know as opposed to a written record, I don't know, kind of can imply some type of, and I don't know, to create like a detailed record for every emergency response situation may be onerous, but like, yeah, but I think that would not be a
Yeah,
problem.
no,
Yeah, I think that would not be a problem.
that wouldn't be a problem at
Yeah.
all. No. I can certainly notify
Sure.
Chris. if Something that happened like that.
So the thing is, we need to submit this for the warrant.
Is there do you have a deadline, I assume?
Yeah. Yeah, before our next meeting, so if we can,
We can provide notice on that. Okay.
I think what they're talking about is revising this. Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
license the
so-
language to.
changing hearings to public meetings and then
Yeah.
emergency response officials, including utilities or something to that. effect. Yeah. Without satisfying.
Mimi, can you just say
Yeah,
say
I
that
think
one more
I-
time into the microphone? What you just said about the utilities where you're including them?
Under K1, emergency response officials, including utilities. Or. Maybe in parentheses, which would include utilities?
I would just be broader. I would just say including utilities and their agents. Or whatever. Might not always be National Grid. You guys might have contractors. So I think
It's a fair point, yeah.
And agents? Okay.
I'm not a lawyer.
Good comment. I think to your question about the public meeting, I think that's, the the places I noted it was in sections 5, 6, and 7 of L. So I think if that was, for the most part, I think it would require maybe some other minor tweaks. For instance, I think when you say public hearing, you say per section H, so it wouldn't, I think it would just be public meeting in L5,
Yeah.
similar, and I mean, in 6, you say, it says upon the determination, I don't know, at the consolidated, I guess a consolidated meeting is what you're suggesting. And then that last part of 6, it says it's subject to the findings of any public hearings regarding public shade trees. I'm not sure what was intended there, if that was a separate meeting or. I mean, I guess in my view, I think the point is like you could almost omit that last unless it was intended to convey something additional. And is in compliance with the requirement of this bylaw.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was referring to L5.
So are you saying that
Six.
for scenic roads, there are no public hearings for maintenance on scenic roads?
Public meetings, so just with the utilities and their agents.
For the annual, to approve the annual plan.
So is Karina's question, if there is vegetation management happening on, I mean, our vegetation management plan will cover scenic as well as non-scenic roads. To me, it creates, I can't envision a situation where we're having a public hearing when they're on certain aspects because there may be a scenic road, but only a public meeting on other aspects because it's a non-scenic road. And I think the public meeting would cover it. I mean, that's my, I guess, view of it.
And you had indicated if it's an emergent issue on a scenic road, then you would go through the process that is required of a scenic road.
When you say emergent, if it's an emergency, like if
not an
it's,
emergency,
oh, like
but if there is, impending something happen, a car struck a tree and 6 weeks later it's beginning to lean and you're realizing it's going to impact. I think that's something that should have a hearing on a scenic road. Because we need to understand that.
What about if
That
That might qualify
that
as,
could be an emergency.
to me, that's an emergency, just like
Okay.
lightning hitting a tree and tipping it over. We don't have time for the public hearing.
so
That scenario.
I
Car
like
hit
that
it,
scenario.
but if a car hit it, you're gonna know if it's leaning already, right? You're gonna take it down right then and there.
It's tipping over. It's probably going into a transformer, a power line, or the street.
Although there was one on Sears Road that it took being hit by several cars over several months before it was like.
I mean, I
You
don't
know
know
that one too? I was afraid to drive under it. I'm like, okay, yeah, you had that, sir.
I don't know if you're talking about a situation potentially where we would have, like, if we had a project in town,
Maybe that's what.
Yeah.
whether it's like a project where a planned project where we know we're gonna be doing work on this line, and we're gonna need to remove trees.
Well,
that would be
I
different.
would ask the question, what if a customer that lives, even a residential customer that lives on a scenic road is requesting a new service? They're upgrading the service, they're gonna add heat pumps into their home, they're gonna add electric vehicles, and they need a 400 amp electric service now. As we move away from fossil fuels, we're gonna see that come up a lot more. So I guess the question I would have is, would you expect that to change a transformer on a scenic road, we would be going through a public hearing?
If you're taking down a tree,
I mean,
right? Is that if you're removing?
If
a
we're
tree?
taking a tree out.
Well,
Flame
yes,
cutting, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
yes, because that is what the MGL 40, section 15C speaks to.
I mean, I think this is the one section where we probably agree to disagree, town council and myself, in terms of when the planning board jurisdiction is triggered under the scenic road statute. I don't read it as any. There has to be some maintenance work happening in the road, the way I read it, to trigger the consolidated hearing. That said, if you adopt it the way you adopt it, you know, that's,
I
I
think
guess
he
that's.
felt, I think
that's-
that town council felt that that's not in keeping with the letter and spirit and intent of the statute. So, my concern is that, here's my scenario, there's a tree, it's getting larger. They grow in diameter and they start growing too close to the power lines for your comfort or for your criteria. There's nothing wrong with the tree, it's just getting bigger and bigger. And at some point, a large diameter trunk is too close to the power line. Maybe it got missed, maybe, I don't know, maybe it was an area that wasn't as prevalent of a problem. Now you want to come in and you want to cut that tree down. According to MGL for scenic roads, you would need a consolidated public hearing to take that tree down.
I would say, again, I don't
Because
read the
it's not a
statute that way,
hazard.
but I think per your bylaw, the way it's written, we would need a consolidated public hearing. And we would come in for that hearing for a planned tree removal on a scenic road, if that's how
Mhm.
you adopt the bylaw. Do we, again, I think we disagree on that's what the statute says. And so that's, I mean, I think an area of disagreement that we have with town council as to whether that's consistent with the statute, but certainly if that's how your bylaw reads, and I think then at that point, I mean, we either have to comply with the bylaw or we'd be in a position where we'd have to challenge it. And I don't really think that that's a position. we
Right,
wanna
and if
be in.
so, some of those trees
Yeah.
are within your maintenance plan on a scenic road, it turns out maybe there's 2 of those trees on one of the road every couple of years or something. How would we, we wouldn't know that unless, we get this maintenance plan and it identifies, well, these 2 trees seem okay. They're not hazardous, but they need to be trimmed. I think that's what the main point was at the beginning of this discussion. That it's those particular trees that there's nothing wrong with them, but that they're gonna get in the way. And they could cause a problem in the future, but maybe not within a year or 2 or 3. But you want to take care of business because you're on that street this year. So
So I
not to
guess my-
complicate it, just an
Mhm.
idea.
No. And I think just to make sure we're on the same page, and my takeaway from the discussion was, there's for vegetation management plan purposes. Any work we're doing we are proposing to do under what would be an approved plan. There'd be a consolidated meeting with the planning board. For everything, scenic, non-scenic, that would be part of our approved plan. For anything else that's a non-emergency, that's outside of the approved plan. So if we intend to remove a tree, if it's a non-scenic road, then we'd be before the select board. If it is a scenic road, then per your bylaw, we'd be before, it'd be a consolidated hearing. Those would be outside of the vegetation management plan. I think that's my takeaway from, the discussion.
That's my.
Okay.
Okay, I understand.
Can I just make one last, I know we're running late, but I just wanted, this is more of a clarification. The reference to 220, the regulation CMR 22.
Yeah.
So that regulation it's a notification regulation that deals with transmission related vegetation management in our rights of way. So it's not actually part of the distribution related vegetation management activities we're talking about. They're two they're apples and oranges, and we do comply with that regulation, and we provide notifications under that regulation. And it's really just a notification that we make to the town, to the DPU, I think to abutters along the right of way. It really has nothing to do, it's not work that's jurisdictional to the town, it's work within our right of way, and it's just a notification that we make. So I just wanted to point that out. I don't know if there may have been some confusion as to, because it does talk about vegetation management, but it's transmission related
So it's
work. It's not a plan, it's just a notification. I mean, if you read the regulation, we provide a notification, I guess if you will. I mean, I'd have to look at specifically what the notification by regulation is.
So you're
Um,
talking about when transmission lines cross public roadways.
I mean, they potentially could cross the roadway. I mean, they're within our rights of way. I'm just looking for the regulation. Yeah.
Is that I think transmission are the very large.
Yep.
Right, and the distribution is really what's kind of impacting our local roads, and
Yeah.
so the distribution, the CMR that you referenced doesn't necessarily. indicate the distribution. It's not in kind of the same vein as what we're trying to appeal to with the bylaw.
Right.
No,
and I guess the
But
question
we
that
have
was
had instances where, I do recall maybe 1 or 2 years ago, there were a couple of spots where the transmission lines crossed South Road, town roads. And it's at those spots where 1 or 2 trees were removed. I could be mistaken, but it was along, so does the right of way for the National Grid include the roadway section it crosses over, or does the town still hold jurisdiction on the roadway? So that's not a big deal. I don't think it happens often, but I just want that to, be understood that it does come up once in a while.
No, and that's a good point. I think that's definitely that's our transmission group that would be doing that work. And just reading, and so it would be a notification that we provide annually that describes the work we're going to do for that calendar year. It's not, again, it doesn't really fall within the purview of public shade trees. It is a notification we're providing. And I guess if there's more information you want on that, I could consult with our transmission group to find out sort of the details of how that's handled. If you have questions on that. But it wouldn't be part of the public shade tree process.
Okay. So if I remove.
Or part of the
reference to that, is there
I shouldn't say it wouldn't be,
so if you do a 5-year plan, so on an annual basis, would there be a problem with submitting by March 31st your plans for that?
No.
Okay, so I can just remove any reference.
yeah, I think that's fair.
Mimi, as it stands right now, we usually know what our upcoming fiscal year work plan is by October, November. And our fiscal year starts April 1st. So I could submit something formally prior to, March in the winter. So I usually know what we're going to be working on for the upcoming year by around December, January, February.
This is suggesting earlier in the year, this is suggesting the following.
Yeah, so.
Yes.
So he's saying he can do it for December for that year, right?
Are you saying?
We have a fiscal year that operates from April 1, and that's when our work plan starts, April 1st of each year. So I don't really know what our upcoming, the following year's feeders are until probably the fall of this year, fall of 2022. I will have the work plan solidified for 2023.
So we're asking for March of 2022 for
Yeah.
2023. We're asking for it 6 months earlier.
So maybe December, because we want it before they start their work on it.
Yeah, that's the point. We want it before you start the work.
So when you have it in December or January is when we probably want it, because March would be kind of too late, because they'll be starting April 1st.
I'm sorry, I was gonna ask one question. I know the language you had in there before the 90 days prior to the date of the utility company. I think that comes from section 14.
Yeah.
Was there a reason why? Is are you looking for additional?
Well, just so we
Notice.
know every year when.
Oh, so it's not just, I get you. Okay.
I don't have the plan a year ahead of time. So if that's what you're asking, we don't have it.
So if we said December for the following year?
Yeah. If you needed it by, 3 or 4 months ahead of time,
So just so to be clear, so for like 2023, you would be, when would you know
for the 2023, we'll know the plan probably in a couple of months, probably October, November.
So in October or November of 2022.
Yes, yeah.
So if we say December, by December 31st for the following year.
That's pretty safe. That's pretty safe.
So it's 60 days, I think, is what the bylaw says, and which tracks with the statute.
So we give you feedback in February.
I believe so. I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
The feedback and I would expect, I might not know exactly when the work will take place, I'll know probably who will be assigned the work because our company awards it pretty soon. I just wouldn't know their schedule, like when they plan on coming in to start.
So when you find the work before you goes out to bid, then are you on site when it actually, the cutting happens or what, or?
We have the contractor supervision out in the field, so we do know who's accountable, who's visible in the field, representing the contractor that we awarded the work to. No, I am not personally always out there. I do inspect the crews, I do inspect the work as it's ongoing. But it's random. Yeah.
And I think this section 10 does require 30 days advance written notice before you actually start the work. Does that, and I think section 14 says 14 days, but I think I assume you preferred 30.
I'm
Is that
comfortable with
doable?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For our maintenance work.
in terms of when you actually, yeah.
Our
schedule that.
maintenance work, there shouldn't be any surprises. We,
Any public comment?
No, I guess I'll make one observation.
You have to come and talk to the,
I'll make one observation from that.
the apple.
From the actual grid people. And that is that in this town, the strategy, at least up until now, has been that every road is a scenic road except for a few that we haven't gotten to yet. That's the next hearing that's coming up. But you may want to keep that in mind because the distinction between scenic and non-scenic may be nil in town.
Sorry, was that Tim Lit?
That's him.
Okay. We have 9 attendees currently in the Zoom meeting with no hands raised.
Any comment from anybody on Zoom?
We have 9 attendees, no hands raised.
Okay. All right. So are we ready to extend this public hearing?
Can I just ask one question that's not specifically related to the bylaw, but is related to the vegetation management work? So sort of in this period of being in between now and the bylaw becoming effective, as I said, we submitted our plan to Mark. What can we expect? Do you have any sense as far as approval for that work? I think originally we had hoped to start it in the summer when I think this first came up, and so at this point, obviously, the sooner we can get to it, the better. Any sense of what the what the process might be to get that approved?
You're talking about work you wanted to do this year and you haven't done?
Right.
Yes.
There's 3 applications.
So those applications aren't, yeah, I mean, they were originally, they aren't pending because I think that's kind of started it was a scenic road removal application that we didn't feel was appropriate for this kind of work. And I think now we've ended up in the bucket of vegetation management plan approval. But we haven't been really told what the process is to get that approved. And so maybe that's a question for Mr. Purple when we, but I wanted to put it to this board as well.
So that's the plan for this year for 2020.
Right, exactly. So we're basically behind schedule. We would have, I think, normally started it this summer, right?
yeah, a lot of this information was shared based on past experience back in April to Karen and Chris. So I did notify them the way I typically do back in April. I know that was the past.
Right, and we did receive formal applications from Karen Galligan at the DPW superintendent to accommodate the public hearing process required under the scenic road state statute. So we did get those in March timeframe.
I think those have essentially been withdrawn, at least that's what my view of it is, of the applications. I mean, those applications I think were submitted
Well, we were waiting for you to do a butters notification and then get back to us, and then an interim. we
Right, but I think
found
that,
there's
that's
no
sort of, so
abutter
I think
notice.
that's, I think this is what triggered the discussion of whether for vegetation management work, it was appropriate to be having public hearings on individual. For like an individual scenic road removal, when that wasn't what we were proposing, and so I think there was some communication between Dave and in your office, and it sort of just kind of. We didn't
Well,
hear
no,
anything.
we
for a
got,
while.
that's true, but we also got a legal opinion from town council that indicated to us that we should have a public hearing on the vegetation management plan. So,
On the vegetation management plan, yeah, which is separate, I
Yeah.
think, from the applications that were previously submitted.
So I think a couple of things, either we can just go forward and have the consolidated hearings from the work that you want to do. Or if you follow the chapter 87, we review for 60 days. If it's approved, then you have to notify us 90 days before you want to do any work, and then it's, so I think if we just do hearings, it would be quicker.
So I mean, my perspective, and Dave, you and Bob, you can comment, is we should be following a process that's consistent with the statute and with what you're proposing to adopt, which I think is the section 14 process, right, for approving vegetation management plans, which is, as I understand it, would be, if the process you're planning to adopt would be a consolidated public meeting, that would be one way of approving this year's plan, which admittedly, we're now approaching the end of the year, so it's a little bit more maybe urgent to some degree. But that would be, I think, how I would, I mean, we've now submitted the plan under the statute as requested by Mr. Purple under section 14. He specifically made a written request to us that we responded to, and it's been submitted under that statute. And so in the
and
absence of
those
the
are the
bylaw,
same,
statute
and those
would
are the
apply.
same circuits of that you submitted back in the spring?
Correct.
Okay, so those are the same circuits, not new. Okay.
So it would be a vegetation management plan approval, not a scenic road application.
Well,
Is
I
what,
just think it would be quicker to just do them, because we have 60 days to respond, and then before you come into town, that we need to give 90 days notice or something.
I think it's 30 days, well, 14 days under the statute, I believe, before you start the work under, I think, section 14. Is that what you're talking about? Maybe I'm. 14 days prior to beginning.
The plan shall be submitted not less than 90 days prior to the date of utility proposes to begin its maintenance work. Upon receipt of the plan, the tree warden or designee shall notify the utility within 60 days in writing whether or not the plan has been approved.
I see what you're referring to. So yeah, you're correct. I mean, we're less than 90 days out, I think, in part because of the situation. I mean, we did originally start this process as Dave indicated back in April. So there is, I think we're in a little bit of a unique situation. I recognize we're kind of operating without a bylaw. We're trying to comply with the statute, understanding that we're sort of outside of this 90-day period. So I don't know if I guess I would put it, we haven't heard back from Mr. Purple. If there's a process to approve that plan in less than whatever the statutory time period is, that would allow us to do the work quicker. I'm a little bit concerned with doing the public hearing because it's a public hearing for a scenic road, public shade tree removal that doesn't really have anything to do with, but that's not, we're not just coming in for scenic roads. We're proposing our annual maintenance plan, which is,
So
I think,
we'll.
I mean, maybe that requires further. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and fair enough. I mean, I think maybe it requires a follow-up discussion. I mean, we're certainly open to doing it in whatever manner will get the work done quickest and understanding it won't won't be setting any precedent if we do it a different way, but
So this is the vegetation cleanup that we do once every 5 years.
right, it was the plan, well, for these 3 circuits.
Yeah,
So there was a plan submitted for.
Yes, these 3 circuits are part of the 5-year. There's other circuits in town that are still on a 5-year that go into Southborough, but these 3 happen to be the ones scheduled for 2022.
Speaking of the mic, please.
Discussion of it needs to go.
We very much appreciate
Yeah,
your
yeah,
indulging us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. very
Thank
much.
you. All right. Feel free to reach out if there's any additional information we can provide.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for indulging my.
Yeah.
Yes, I appreciate it. Yes.
All right.
We need to extend the public hearing.
Oh, I make a motion that we send a public hearing for warrant article tree protection bylaw section 153 draft tree policy draft tree fund language to be continued to September 26th, 2022 at 7:10 PM.
Second.
Good. We have a motion, a second, any discussion? All in favor, Latrell, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Muriel, yes. Okay, that's that. So that we- Very good. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing for scenic roads. And the public hearing is continued from 8/22 and 9/1/2020.
Would you like me to
Yeah.
give a quick update?
Sure.
Okay, first off, we received, and filed Mullins forms for, hold on. For Andrew Mills, who was absent at the September 1st meeting that we had on Thursday that was added to discuss the scenic road, bylaw warrant article, I should say. And that has been filed, with the town clerk's office. And as for the update, since the last meeting, on September 1st, at the last meeting, as if you recall, a phrase was added to basically the warrant article from the last annual town meeting. And it was agreed that that would be provided to Mark Purple and to include within the warrant draft already. So that was done. And basically that's in the warrant for now, unless there's further changes, and that takes us to today. Public hearing number 3.
Very good. Ms. Houlihan, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add, but I just had been preoccupied with my day job, so I haven't had a chance to let the Historic Commission and the Conservation Commission know the language that I've submitted. So that my plan is to send them a note with the new warrant language. So I, at this point, am expecting just the planning board to be the sponsor of the article. This would bring all roads except for numeric roads in Southborough to be scenic. So if this passes, so there are 68 streets in town that are non-numeric or they're state highways that would be pulled in to kind of designate. So then every street that's not numeric or a state highway would be included in Southborough as a scenic road.
Wait a second, can you say that again? You said there's 68 streets that are non-numeric?
68 streets that would be pulled in that don't fall under statute, that can't be a scenic road. So state numbered highways like Route 85, Route 30, Route 2, Route 9 would not be allowed to have a scenic road.
Okay.
That's my update.
Very good.
And Mike, since I did watch the replay from the first, and I'm very impressed with your driving around town, looking at all of the streets that we're discussing and looking at. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate that effort.
I got to see all
And
the
Kevin's,
trees that need some major repair.
Yeah.
or
well,
cleanup.
thank you for doing that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Any comment, Mr. Stein? Any questions?
No, thank you.
Ms. Demaria?
No, nothing for me. Good job, Marnie.
Thank you.
Industry protection and stormwater protection.
And I just wanted to reiterate what you went over the last meeting. So you had received comment that many towns defined their scenic roads and designated scenic roads based on a definition. So you looked at many other towns, put together a definition that was based on those other towns, and then went and visited 3/4 of the 68 roads that have not been designated and found that a majority of all the roads all fit within that definition, so might as well just designate them all as scenic roads. Am I correct?
Yeah, and that specific language, which I'll read very quickly. And of course, I don't have it at the touch of my fingertips. The specific language was in addition to what we've passed in like 1974 and 1978, this supplemental scenic road would add in language that says, basically, I could share my screen again too. Let me do that. Although that's not sharing on this. You have to share in here, Colleen. But it just basically says that it would include in language to take into consideration simplification of town administrative and logistical scenic road management, which basically would address many of the issues that we just discussed in our prior meeting. And it's really to make sure that just instead of making it more challenging so that there's, 80 streets that are scenic designations and 172 that aren't, just make them all scenic. Administratively, it makes it very easy. Everything would be a consolidated hearing on a scenic road, and we'd be able to kind of manage our town effectively and efficiently, or so the hope is. We wouldn't miss anything.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all your work on this. Any public comment?
We have 8 attendees in the Zoom room, no hands raised.
Anyone in Zoom land, if you have a comment, please raise your hand.
Next.
Okay, seeing none.
Make a motion, we continue the public hearing for warrant article scenic roads to be continued to September 26, 2022 at 7:15 PM.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, Latrell, yes.
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Miriam, yes.
Very good. And the next item on the agenda is a discussion item, 154 Turnpike Road, site compliance scenic road tree removal. Do you want to bring us up to date, Tina?
Mimi,
Yes.
sorry, it's Jesse Stein. You know what? We don't have any more public hearings on the agenda this evening, and it's a little bit hard to participate this way tonight. So I'm going to sign off at this time. Thank you.
Sorry, Jesse.
Jesse's a little under the weather too, by the way. That's why he didn't want to come in person.
I'm glad he chose to sit home.
Yes.
She's gonna need the microphone. She's speaking.
Would you like me to prepare, just give a brief update on where we are?
Yes, please.
Okay, so as you recall, we had, back in July or end of June, we had asked, Bill DePietri to come in and speak to the non-compliance issues that were discovered at 154 Turnpike Road, AKA, I think it's White's Corner. And some of the things with the landscaping, the lighting fixture changes, discussion of a fence that was conditioned to be installed along the southern perimeter, and things of that nature. So we had correspondence back and forth, and the DePietris indicated that they would address those issues and come back to the planning board with that information. So this afternoon, we did receive some of that information. And we had anticipated that we would use this information on the next public meeting on the 26th. But I forwarded it to the planning board members so that they could already have it and look at it, and you could determine whether you wanted to speak to it this evening or not. And again, those items were a landscape plan that showed the changes that had been made to the site. Unfortunately, some of the planting still continued, but Mr. DePietri did let us know that he was going to provide a plan showing kind of an overlay of what was approved and what he's proposing if there were any changes. Let's see, installing additional trees where the non-compliant driveway had been cut through a couple of years ago, in lieu of extending the 3 panels of the fence that were installed in the corner, because a lot of existing vegetation has grown between the property and the southern side of that property. And then lastly, specifications for the LED fixtures that were installed in replace of the old gas light looking fixtures. And then there was a tree that was in question on Breakneck Hill Road, just north of the driveway, whether that was on public or private property, because it has been cut down. So we requested a letter from a licensed surveyor certifying that whether the tree was or was not. So we received a letter from a professional engineer indicating that that tree was on private property. We have a plan that shows the proposed vegetation and listing the species. And then we also received a spec sheet for the light fixtures and where those lights were replaced, where the fixtures were replaced. So that's what we have. So I don't know if the planning board had time to review that information, but
I did not.
if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, thank you, Karina. I did not have time to look at it. I think I got it at 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Yeah, I
Did anyone else have any?
I did not have time to look at it.
So, and you said, Karina, that you had, you told the proponents that they would be at our meeting on September 26th.
Yeah, I had said that in an email that if you could provide me the information at least 1 week before the preparation for the 9/26 planning board meeting, so that the planning board has time to review it, because it was already September 6th for this meeting, because it was a holiday in between. So we just got them today, so it's kind of tight. So they
Okay.
are aware that there is another meeting.
Okay, so very good. Then we'll see them on September 26th. Okay,
Justin DePietri, I think, is elevated to panelist here.
Yep.
so we'll see you on September 26th, Justin.
Yep. That sounds good. And sorry again for the late submission.
Okay. Very good, thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
On to the next item, discussion item, 40B residents at Park Central. Marnie did a fabulous job putting a letter together. You have anything to update us on, Karina?
Yeah, just, there was one thing I wanted to let you know that we received. We received information from a resident. I'm just trying to see here. Did we? Let me just see. Did we? Yes. The Whitneys, yes, and they're at 23 Blackthorn Drive. They had provided some input. Oh, here it is, on the Mass Housing Financial Authority, I think it's called, on the application that Capital Group Properties presented to them. That's all I have. I'm sorry, I couldn't see it. It's too small. But we did get a couple pages and photographs of their comments. And I believe it was attached. Please find comments offered in opposition to approval of the second Park Central permit application. We received that this morning, this afternoon at just before 3 p.m.
Okay.
Sorry, that was long-winded.
So, any comments on our letter, Mr. Mills?
Thank you. No, good to go.
Ms. Houlihan?
The only comment that I was going to make is I made a mathematical error and I need to update that. I had said that it would represent 1% of the population when it would be 10% of the population. So I just need to update that one line, but I think if you guys are comfortable with that, then I think we could be ready and if everyone had a chance to read it.
Did
Yeah,
Mr.
no, I
Moore?
thought it was great. Thank you. I don't have any comments.
Yeah, I thought it was great. The only thing that I would mention in regards to that covenant. So the select board asked town council to look at that,
Okay.
and town council said two things. One, if the proponent had terminated that agreement after he decided not to appeal the decision, it would be 2 years before he could come back with something. And the second thing was that no plan that was substantially similar. I'm trying to think of the exact wording. So the covenant would still cover a plan and it needed to be substantially similar. So I question whether the plan as followed, either it's not properly before the board because it hasn't been 2 years, or that attachment to Blackthorn and having the 40B right on top of those houses on Tara is not in compliance with that covenant. Although town council said it's not, the town cannot enforce that, but Mass Housing should know about it. So I
Okay.
wonder if we should,
Include that.
yeah,
Okay.
just highlight that covenant. I know that, I'm pretty sure that the select board is also going to do that.
And they discussed that at that meeting. I was aware of that, so I was gonna listen to the tape. So if is town council on that meeting, the Board of Selectmen meeting, or did they just?
No,
provide
she
that?
asked it, Lisa asked afterwards.
Okay,
And I may have an email with his opinion.
okay. So if I can include that, I will include that.
Oh,
And then I guess just the process where Jesse's left the meeting, but you'll send it or sign it, or do you want?
So I think it's great and I'll be fine with it as long as everybody else is comfortable, and then we can send it before the 22nd.
And then we can at some point share it with the other boards. Is there that plan that we'd send it? That would we put it on would we broadly share it? Would we just send it to the? Mr.
Sure, should we
Bolte?
put it on, do you want it on the planning board website as
I don't know.
news or whatever?
Do that. I don't know if we need to, if as long as we just submit it to the Board of Selectmen and the Mass Financing Housing Authority.
Mhm.
Okay.
So this is the opinion of town council. Assuming that Park Central served adequate notice of termination when it chose not to appeal the Superior Court action, it may not submit another application for 2 years. That section also says that the covenants will remain intact for any substantially similar development. I don't have sufficient familiarity with the prior development to make an assessment as to whether the new project is substantially similar. I would say that it is. Notwithstanding the above, this is a private restriction and is not enforceable by the town. And nonetheless, I think it is something that should be brought to the attention of Mass Housing.
Would you be able to forward that to me so I can include that language specifically?
That's it for me.
So Mimi, does this letter go to the select board? And they submit it to Mass Housing, or is
No.
the planning board submitting it directly to Mass Housing?
We're submitting it directly, but we'll send the select board a
Copy.
copy.
Okay, and they will probably put a copy of it in their packet for that. for
Yeah.
Their next meeting, if it's still on their agenda. Because previously they put the other departments and residents' comments on their prior meeting packet. Just so you know.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Sorry.
Marnie, will you be submitting that directly?
Mimi will be submitting that directly,
Okay,
once I finalize the edit.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll sign it and I would think that it would come from the planning department with our fancy letterhead and everything.
Yeah. So if-
Okay.
I did create a makeshift letterhead, so you might have to take out my logo because I wasn't sure. So you guys might have to amend the document.
Well, that header is actually pretty nice with the text you're using because it maximizes the space.
It does, yes, thank you.
Yeah, so there wouldn't be anything wrong with leaving that as well.
Okay,
It is.
perfect.
Any comment from the public before we move on this one? In Zoom land?
7 attendees, no hands raised.
Okay. And away we go. Oh. On discussion of Fayville Hall status.
Okay. Well, Jesse should have stayed for this one, I think. 'Cause-
I think that he asked that this be on, didn't he?
Yeah, so it's my understanding, Mimi, that the select board relinquished their right of first refusal for the property. Therefore, it'll be transitioning or being conveyed to the Southborough Historic Society, which is a private entity, nonprofit. So in discussions with Michael Weishan, the president of Southborough Historical Society, over the past few weeks, I informed him that with the change of use to that property, first of all, the major site plan had lapsed. We did all the calculations for during the pandemic tolling and all that, and the major site plan application approval has lapsed. There is a special permit for adaptive reuse of historic buildings, which I believe tolls in December of this year. But again, those two permits were related to the antique auction house and art gallery, and that use that was proposed for those permits. So if there's a change of use, which it appears there will be, they'll need to reapply for a major site plan approval. And I spoke to Michael Weishan about that, and he sent an email today, which I forwarded to the planning board members with additional questions. So unless there's, I don't know if you had a chance to read it, but unless there's deviations from my opinion that the planning board members have, I think that would still be the process, is my major site plan approval would be required. They would have potentially Dover amendment to utilize, because if they have predominantly classroom or educational purpose for the facility, I believe they could possibly use the Dover amendment, which I think their intent is to have classrooms there. So we might have to check with town council if that is the case, the level of which they're using that. So But that's the bottom line, major site plan approval. The other question was, you know, there was, Michael Weishan had a question about the change of use, and he felt that it would be similar, but similar is not the same. And just because it's less intensive, maybe it doesn't have the same intensity of parking requirement or whatever. It's still required to go through the proper process so that the records are there for future, protects them, protects the town. He asked if there was the opportunity for the application fees to be waived. It is a private entity and we typically don't waive, from my experience, you know, those fees. It will need to be reviewed by our town consultant. But that would be up to the planning board if they waive the application fees. But we still need to pay for the town you know, they'd still need to pay for peer review.
Okay. Any comment from the board?
No comment.
Ms. Houlihan?
No comment. I really didn't have a chance to read this through.
Okay. Mr.
No,
Moyer?
and just to let you know, just interject here that, you know, we were urgent in responding for feedback because it was the select board wanted comments for right of first refusal. But now this process, as they're moving forward, you know, they have some time they have to get the engineering plans together and all that. So we can still discuss the process at another meeting.
Well, I did have a question as to, do we have a sense of what has changed, what will change in the building besides use or anything? Do we know if we'll even need Fuss and O'Neill to take a look at it? So my understanding was the building or the build out, the construction, reconstruction was going to be the same as with the previous plan. But I don't think we have anything from Mr. Weissan about that.
Yeah, we haven't gotten any specific
Of any plan or any use or anything. So that, when the plan comes in, if it's the same plan, then we may not need Fuss and O'Neill. If there's any change, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it.
I think I read in the Telegram Gazette that there was gonna possibly be a restaurant in the first floor. So, sounds like a change of use.
Well, it's
Yeah,
not gonna, as far as I know, it's not gonna be an auction house, so it will be a change of use. And the site plan has lapsed, so either if it was gonna be an auction house, they need a major site plan because the site plan has lapsed. And if they change the use, they need a site plan because they changed the use.
Yeah, so I didn't know whether they could just take the previous plan and say, this was the plan, there's 3 floors, this is gonna be offices, this is gonna be museum, this is gonna be something, we're just gonna resubmit it. It sounds like you're saying there's going to be a change. Or we'll see when.
We don't know.
it's submitted.
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah, and usually PE stamps are good for about 2 years if they're not, you know, on old plans. You don't want to go too long because things can change at the site.
Yep, okay. Any comments from the public? Grant or Tim? Right, yeah.
And the restaurant involves the Board of Health.
Oh, yeah,
That's the trick one changes potentially because of grease traps and.
yeah. Right.
It's 9:30.
Was that Tim
anyone-
Lit?
It
That
was.
was Tim Lit.
Okay,
He said code changes. And if
Code
there's a
changes,
restaurant,
okay.
they'll need the Board of Health.
okay, good. We just for our recording clerk's benefit, so she knows who's speaking, because we couldn't see him from here. We just heard him.
Anyone in Zoom land that has any comment, raise your hand.
We have 7 attendees, no hands raised.
Seeing none. We can move on to the next discussion item, which is the scenic stonewall removals, School Street, St. Mark's.
Yes, well, I finally drafted that long-awaited letter that I had been tasked with several meetings ago. And so I combined a letter, back in June and July, the planning board asked me to prepare a letter to send to the select board to let them know that the planning board had become aware of, St. Mark's Street intersection with Marlborough Road. There was a scenic stone wall there, as potentially some trees that are outside the property that are on town right away. And then also on School Street at Main Street, the northeastern corner, there was a wall that was, there was this existing stone wall there. So what you see on the screen is a GIS mapping view of St. Mark's Street at Marlborough Road. And as you know, that's where they're going to be doing the road improvement. And that yellow line you see, that's kind of a U-shaped upside down, the apex. If you look about an inch or so beyond that, on the outside of that, towards St. Mark's Street, there is a stone wall right there and some trees. So this image represents that. There's a Google Map image that actually shows, if you scroll down a little more, you can see the stone wall and the trees there. And then if you go a little bit further down, there's also the plans from VHB roadway improvement. And if you look closely, you can see the same, it's kind of sideways now, but you see there's tree designations there. A 3-inch deciduous, a 10-inch deciduous around the loop there. There's also somewhere on there a call out to the retaining wall, stone retaining wall. There's a small call out on the top edge there. So, more evidence that it appears there was, something to be, followed up on. And then we have a picture showing what it looks like now. If you go a little further, currently, that those features are gone. I can tell you that I was eating my lunch out by the library parking lot under the shade tree last week or a week ago or more, and I had kind of pulled onto the grass when a crew showed up, and they were the archaeologists who were going to be looking for any remnants there. So remains, I should say. So I quickly backed up because I thought it was just like gas line water marking, they were marking for dig safe or whatever. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. They said, oh no, we're going to be checking this over the next couple of weeks. So that was taking place. So again, I added these pictures into this letter so that the select board could see directly a comparison. And then if you go further down, I also explained the School Street at Main Street. You see, that was the original wall. You're looking east toward down Main Street towards Park Street, Lattisquama. If you go a little further, so when the Main Street reconstruction project came through, the contractors there rebuilt the wall, and on the left-hand side, you can see that it was pretty tall and much larger. And then it must have become a site distance issue, possibly. So then the DPW went in and tried to help the situation by removing the height of the wall there. But again, this would be the second impact to a scenic stone wall. And if you scroll a little bit further down, that's just the summary explaining that. And go just a little bit up in the last paragraph. I'm basically asking, I stated, keep going just a little bit further. Right there, the planning board is respectfully requesting that the select board as tree warden provide scenic road stone wall and tree removal applications for stone walls and trees removed at the 2 subject locations. And that's in order to mitigate the permit requirement so that we have something on the record that, they are gone, but maybe there's some kind of mitigation that could go with it. Maybe they reuse the stones, plant a tree somewhere, make sure they use a native species in the park that they're rebuilding there. So if there's no comments or changes, I can undraft the letter and actually submit it to the select board via the town administrator. And copy Karen Galligan, as she's involved in the street improvement projects, and then the tree warden administrator, so he's in the loop.
Very good. Thank you, Karina. Mr.
You're
Mills?
welcome.
Great summary, great pictures. I think it depicts the issue perfectly. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Ms. Houlihan.
Thank you, Karina. I think this letter does exactly what we were looking for to do. So appreciate you writing it. And let's see what that mitigation process will be.
Hi, Karina. Thank you. Yeah, it was worth the wait, Karina. I don't think anybody could have written a better letter than that. I wanted to just ask a question about the scenic road stone wall and tree removal applications. I haven't been through a stone wall application before, but I seem to remember some neighbors in my neighborhood that took a stone wall, removed it, and was told to put it back up. And I wonder, at least for the stone wall, if we can request that they replace the stone wall. I don't know that those stones are still available because there's a pile of rocks. I hope that they are, but who knows where they are? But I mean, tree is a different story because there's a park being planned. I think, I don't know what to say, but I know that you had highlighted there were several public shade trees there along the public way. I'd like to see that they get replaced. This is one where I would like inch for inch because there's plenty of space. Typically on scenic roads, you don't have a lot of space. But on the stone wall, I think it's been the planning board's procedure to, if a homeowner removes a stone wall along the public way, and whether it was an inadvertent or whatever other reason, that they're asked to put it back up. And I'd like to ask that the town find the appropriate stones. If it wasn't the original stones, then appropriate field stones or granite or whatever that we have, and not, something that's not to this, area. And we ask them to, have it rebuilt.
So would that be part of the mitigation through the
application.
process?
Is it, one last question, Karina, is it clear how long that stone wall was? Was it just that little kind of, the very tip?
Yeah, I
You
think
know,
it was just around the apex, around that arc.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to look closer, but there's lots of images everywhere of where it
I
was.
think the reason I ask is I think it kind of on one side went down St. Mark Street a little. And I don't know how far, there's still plenty of images out on Google Maps and Earth and whatever. But I do think it was a little bit longer than it looked on that plan.
Okay, and then,
The VHB plan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
there's
would
like a
agree with you.
shadow. Yeah, and I think I might have pulled that one from Google Maps, but there's like a shadow along St. Mark's. And, this is an old, just, for the record, this wasn't a perfect stone wall. Neither was the one on School Street. These are old, historic, they're a little bit disheveled. They have a history of who put them together. It wouldn't be something that we would put, maybe, put to build now. But this is part of the history of Southborough, and it's being removed tree by tree and stone by stone. And I really feel strongly that we should ask them to replace this. I also think there needs to be some kind, something else, because tonight we're talking about all this stuff in our hearings. And, as a town, we're just not really owning up to the fact that we're losing our history. And at the hands of people who work for the town. And I just, it's fine to call the select board together and say, okay, we're going to replace some trees. We would like you to replace trees, please. But that's really not getting to the problem, is we're going to keep facing this if we don't face the problem of why are these things being removed in the first place. But I think this is a great letter you wrote, Karina. I just would like to see a little bit stronger, especially with regard to the stone wall, because I think there's been no doubt that the planning board has asked, neighbors who have removed walls to replace them.
so, to rebuild the stone wall, that request would be for the St. Mark's location, correct?
Yeah, maybe it's made at the hearing after the application, but I would like maybe that the intent is that we would like to see these things replaced.
What
Yeah,
about the
but-
stone on School Street?
So that one is a mess, and I don't know if anybody's looked at it, but it looks like somebody
I-
hacked it with a saw.
No,
It looks worse than.
I go by it a lot. And it was, I can say before, it was dangerous. Even in my Suburban, it was, it was tough to see anything coming up there. So, for that one, I would like to see it like finished properly or rounded out, made more even with
some
something.
aesthetic.
No, but something like, I agree with you. It looks like someone just came along with a chisel and just topped it off and said, okay, that looks good. It does, it looks like a car accident happened there.
Yes, it does.
And they took
Yeah.
the stones away and they left what was left.
So
Um,
let me ask the board then, so in the letter, we're asking them to follow through in the correct process and apply for the stone wall removal through the scenic roads. Is that the correct process, or do we just ask them to place the
like
walls?
we put them through.
I think that's, in my opinion, that's part of the mitigation that they come before us. And then
Right.
we can say how we want things replaced instead of saying in this letter, replace the wall. Because
Yeah.
who knows what would happen then.
Well, we
I
could
mean,
interject, planning board you could anticipate, the planning board may request that the wall be replaced and the other one finished, like you could give them a little heads up. The other thing is that they hired a landscape architect to design that area right now, which I'm not sure it is. I thought it was VHB, but I'm not sure. So they're designing that right now. So if they have to take into account putting that wall back, hopefully select board gives them a heads up that you need to start thinking about this, because you're going to design the plan and then they're going to come back for a change order and say, oh, you didn't want this design. You didn't tell us you wanted this in there. Somehow that information should get conveyed to the consultant, that there's potential that they should consider that already as a mitigation, and then come forward and say, this is what we're doing.
Okay.
I
don't
think
know,
that's,
just-
I think there's some, just general challenge in the community around the whole process. That a design landscaper was hired to do, was VHB. It was a very strong worker with DPW to begin with. So I think that might be,
I just
A
don't know
little
for
bit.
sure it was them, that's all. I don't know.
it was.
It was.
Okay.
So, to the board, do you want Karina to add that additional language we may be seeking, or just leave it as it is?
No.
Leave it just the way it is and just say, reinforce the process that we run. And maybe, I don't know, would we want to schedule a date? Who's appealing or appearing for their application process? Would it be the select board?
I would think so. I
Yeah.
don't know.
And someone should be should we say we would expect an application for a meeting within the next 30 days?
Well, we need, 3 weeks out at least for the public hearing. There's no abutter notification, but you have to post it in the paper 2 weeks and then another Monday. So it's like 4 weeks out. But they still need chance to prepare the application.
Well, I want to bring up something that he wants to talk about, but the property owner is St. Mark's. And although DPW did the work, the property owner is St. Mark's. And so, I mean, under our process, if it was any other property owner, we would ask the property owner to come and explain why they did what they did, and let them know that that wasn't allowed under our bylaw.
Well, just to clarify, Debbie, I think the stone wall and the trees in question are on town property. St. Mark's owns
Incorrect.
inside that apex. You know what I
Because
mean? So it's the town right away that stone wall was on, and those trees. And
So
I don't think
So
we
we
know
we
that.
have someone, for example, on Deerfoot or Flag, I'm not sure who. Took down a stone wall within the right of way, so that person had to come before the planning board at some point, I think. Right, so even though we're talking about the public way, but we're talking about the property that's.
oh, who
associated-
took it down? So if Yeah, I
I'm
don't know.
pretty Town that took it
Yeah,
down.
I think that's still up in a debate, who actually,
Okay. Is there a debate?
I think there is still a debate.
Of who took
Of
it down?
Whose land is it?
Oh, well,
Okay.
Well,
I think it's the
according to-
way where
I
that
think there's lots of
stone
debate.
wall.
Debate.
All right, I know. So if the board is finished, anyone here in the audience have anything to,
Come on to the
Mr.
microphone.
Farrington?
There's,
Yeah. Very loud.
Speaking to the computer.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so, Grant Barrington, 58 Flag Road, member of the St. Mark's Street Park Working Group and Historical Commission, but speaking in my private capacity. Couple things, where to start? First, I don't think there's actually a debate about the ownership of the land. I guess I'll start there. It is St. Mark's land. St. Mark's does own the triangle. My understanding is that the stone wall was in the public right of way, which is of course town property, but in terms of the ownership of the triangle and all that,
And the
it's,
street, St. Mark's Street, is St. Mark's property?
sorry,
The road?
no, the public right of way where the wall was is
It's
the
town.
public right of way.
Okay.
I believe you were talking about who owns the triangle. The town has no ownership over the,
Right.
which I think,
But we're talking
Part of the
about the
concept.
stone wall, which
Yeah.
is on town property.
yes. Additionally, I think both of these examples of stone walls being removed by the town itself are examples of why we need the scenic road bylaw to pass to, create this better system moving forward in order to actually understand what the process is for this. And I had a third thing I was gonna say, but I forgot it, so I think that's it.
Thank you.
And Miss Burns Fiore?
Hi,
Hello.
hi, Patty Fiore, 10 Winter Street. I guess I have a question of point of information first. None of this part that you're talking about now was in the packet for this meeting. In fact, the only thing I found in that packet was related to the Ken's Foods. Am I correct with that?
yes.
Yes.
Why is
So
that?
because the letter was just finished today.
Yes. and
Okay.
also, we put that packet up there as a courtesy. So we try really hard to get everything in there we can. So we put the public hearing information up in news and announcements. That's where everybody's been used to seeing it there. And we use the packet for when there's like an A&R or like a letter like this, when we have the opportunity. We try to put as much information in there as we can.
So what I
Lately,
found-
we've been a little bit swamped, so and with the holiday and everything, we get cut a few days short. So we do it as a courtesy, but we do try to make it complete, but we don't always quite get there. So my.
Okay, so
apologies.
it's not like I should have found this in the news and announcements part.
No, only public hearings we put up there. When it's
Okay.
just discussion items, we try to populate a packet down like the select board does.
Right, which is where I was looking.
Yeah.
So I guess I have a couple of questions and I think the first one is I'd really like clarification on who owns that property. I'm looking at a map, which I think is from the VHB that Mark Purple sent to me back on November 3rd, 2021, when I first questioned what was going on there. And I understand what you're saying about the wall being the public right of way or something. But the map that he sent me seems to clearly state that the wall is set back or was set back quite some distance from the roadway and clearly within the ownership of St. Mark's. So is it feasible to, first of all, get some clarification on whose exact property that wall was that was demolished? And I guess second of all, as Ms. DeMaria was mentioning, if the town demolished a stone wall on private property without the proper permits or whatever is needed to be, who do you request rebuild it? Is that the town responsibility because they demolished it, or St. Mark's responsibility because they own the property? I'd hate to think that we then have to pay to rebuild a stone wall that shouldn't have been demolished in the first place, personally. And I guess my last point is, again, potentially for clarification, but I believe with the new VHB diagrams, when the easement or licensing agreement, however you choose to phrase that, where that wall appears to have been is now parking lot or will be parking lot. So how does that affect the issue of replacing a stone wall that I think is then going to be parking lot? I mean, it's already been graded and gravelled as parking lot where I believe that wall was.
So a couple things.
I'm sorry, ABC.
The stone wall appears, at least on GIS, which isn't always correct, to be in the right of way, which would be town property. If it's on private property, there is no jurisdiction over that wall.
Was that just the GIS that you had up there a second ago?
Yeah.
Okay, so can you blow that up a little bit?
It only lets you go so far,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit more. So if you hit the plus up there,
Those darn satellites.
yeah.
Karina, I seem to remember I asked a really similar question because it seems like it's very set back. And I thought I recall you saying that the stone wall was built like right on the line, which means that it's in the public way. Am I correct? Do you remember?
If it's touching, if it straddles the property line or touches the property line, or, it's partially on both sides of the property, then it's considered town right of way. Then it's considered on town right of way, and it's jurisdictional. So it's true, the GIS mapping may not be 100% accurate, but it's my understanding that that triangular shape you see with the rounded point a little bit lower, the parcel right there, that I believe that's St. Mark's property.
Correct.
Yeah.
And often people, like if you look at the town road and the town property with the town road, often people think that the right of way is the paved area, but it's not. There are shoulders and everything that extend off the paved area that's still within town right of way. And I know what you're saying. If you zoom in a little bit, it looks like this, it appears the stone wall is outside of that yellow line. The VHB plans should be including some kind of existing conditions that identify a property line on there. And not just schematically, especially the easement plans. So maybe if you send me a copy of what the plan you're talking about that you have, I could look at it and give an opinion, but I'm not a surveyor, but I could maybe look at it and clarify it for you.
So is that overlay, is that the assessor's map overlay?
Yeah. It's the assessor's mapping information with GIS shape files. So you can look at the assessor's maps too, and they're for tax purposes. The GIS is for visual interpreting and looking at it in a schematic sense. So you'd really need an actual survey to define where that property line is. But it appears.
So the way I'm understanding it is what was the old St. Mark's Street is all going, yeah, well, not all of it, up to the apex there.
Yeah, it's gonna loop
That's-
around.
That's going away.
Mhm.
And all that goes between where the new road cuts through that triangle you have outlined and what is that, north of it
Mhm.
to the intersection of 84 is either owned by St. Mark's or is part of the license agreement to St. Mark's.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen that plan. Unless one of the planning board members can speak to that. I don't know. I haven't seen I'm not familiar with the easement plans of what the land, where they're swapping out the land. I see the VHB plan, the general layout, which I had in the letter there, a small part of it. So I can't really say.
And am I correct in my, remembrance of the last time I drove by there that where that wall was is now part of what the parking lot has been graded and gravelled?
I think that's temporary parking for,
I don't think so. I
for
think that's
people
where the
who are
parking lot
working?
is.
Oh, okay. I
No,
thought that was
that's-
people working on the dorm were parking there and walking over.
Um,
It was
I
all
mean-
taped off today when I drove by, I think in preparation for them to do their.
Well, they've already started.
The
Well-
archaeological digging, yeah.
So I don't think there's gonna be any parking when they're digging.
No.
No,
it's-
but I'm just talking about the location of the parking lot, which is the area that has been graded and gravelled on the north side of where the new St. Mark's connection to 85 is.
Yeah, see
That's to
plan-
be the St. Mark's parking lot. And then
Yeah.
the area that was the old St. Mark's Street is going to be taken out and returned to grass in the way that I understand it. So that parking lot is directly adjacent to where their playing fields are.
Yeah,
So if you are asking the town to rebuild a historic stone wall that the town took down without appropriate planning or permitting, where are they going to put it if it's in the middle of a parking lot that they've promised to St. Mark's?
Well, so presumably that will be part of the application process. And presumably the planning board wouldn't ask for a stone wall in the middle of a parking lot.
right, there'd be maybe some other way to mitigate that, maybe use the walls along another edge of the project or in some fashion to preserve, the
Or
goal
the
is to
right of-
preserve those. Yeah. Right. And
I'm
that
sorry,
would
I
be
didn't
to-
hear that. I didn't.
Sorry, Mimi, I cut you off.
I said, or in the right of way of the new relocated street. Sure.
Do you have any understanding of St. Mark's, agreed to or authorized the town, because of the reciprocal license agreement, it gives the town sort of authority, I think, to act on their behalf, if I understand. I did read it, but it's predicated on easements, which we don't have. Remember, they were not voted in last meeting. So, but all that aside, we're talking as if this is, under normal circumstances, we would go to the property owner who's, I think this is what Ms. Brinsfiore is saying. The property owner is St. Mark's, and even though it's in the right of way, do we want to approach them to find out whether they requested that it be removed, for example? Because the town did it, it's no secret that they did it, but do we know whether St. Mark's asked for it?
I have no idea.
So, I mean, if it were a property owner, we would send the letter to the property owner. So, could I ask, They removed it?
Well, if it was a property owner in the town who moved it, it would be up to the town to mitigate.
But I can't divorce myself from thinking that like St. Mark's didn't know what was going on, because I think that they've been in close touch with the DPW about this project. Can we, I'd
Well,
like to
except that the licensing agreement was signed at least a month after the project started,
Oh,
if you remember correctly. That was the way to, in my personal opinion, mitigate some of the controversy, was to have a licensing agreement, because there were a number of concerns regarding the work that was being done and the trees and everything being torn down on someone else's property.
So we're getting a little off topic here. You're talking about the stone wall in the right of way.
I would like to suggest that we copy St. Mark's, since it's their property. Since they're the property owner, that this wall, it was in the right of way abutting. Would that be acceptable?
I don't see an issue with that.
I'm fine with that.
Just maybe so that they know that this shouldn't have been done? Okay. That would make me happy.
St. Mark's?
I will add that to the letter. at the end.
Okay, thank you. All right. I think we're done with that one. The next discussion item, Davis Road Island removal. Oh, sorry. Oh. Go back to the scenic roads. Take it back, we're not on the Davis. Yes.
Frank Barrington, 58 Flag Road. The thing that I forgot to mention earlier, I did mention it a few months ago when you guys were first considering writing this note. The St. Mark's Street Park Working Group is considering potential designs. We did have a landscape engineer come in. We did not agree to any of his designs, but he did come up with designs for essentially half of the triangle that would be the park, then there would be the road, and then, as Ms. Burns already mentioned, the parking lot. So, I think it would be useful for us if the planning board has any concerns about, whether or not there could be a potentially putting the stone wall back where it was originally, then that would be helpful for us to know if that's what you feel. And also, I believe there was Ms. Demiria wrote us a letter mentioning a parking lot not being an approved use on the specific parcel. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but if they're not allowed to build a parking lot there without site plan approval or something, then that would be useful for us to know as well in our design plans. So, thanks.
Can you just restate that committee's name again? That you're using.
The St. Mark's Street Park Working Group. 6 words, it's a mouthful.
Can we CC the St. Mark's Street Park working group that letter too?
Your chair,
Is that okay?
Marguerite Landry, the chair.
Marguerite Landry, is everyone okay with that?
Good.
Okay.
Yes.
Very good. All right. Now, Davis Road. Island removal. Karina, you want to bring us up to date?
Sure. So, it seems, there was talk of removing the island in Davis Road, which is part of Southborough Estates, a subdivision, from years ago. And, that island was a condition, in regards to the length of the dead end road, and also town code stipulates that if you have a dead end road that's longer than permissible, or by right, so to speak, that you mitigate it with this double barrel layout. So Davis Road is coming up on a list, or is on a list for repaving. And in that coming about, there was discussions between, I believe, the people who live there and the DPW about, you know, the potentially removing that island. So there's landscaping in the island, there's fire hydrants in the island. So if you recall, I spoke with town council, and he indicated to me that the best path would be a modification, or the proper path would be a modification to the subdivision approval to change that condition from that double barrel to allow that to be removed. So there's a little bit of conflicting information, whether this roadway is in the current contract that was put out to bid for repaving, or if it's no longer on the list. So we're not sure what that is, but I did reach out to the fire department, the fire chief, to ask him about his opinion of the hydrants. And he indicated that he completed his on-site view and found that the hydrants located with the islands, that is true, and the general street location must be maintained, if not in the islands along the street, preferably on the right-hand side when driving in. So there are a lot of things to consider here. So I spoke with Kathy Cook about this a little bit, and brought her attention to, you know, who would be applying for the modification. They would need engineered plans, because not only is just removing the island, you know, there's drainage concerns, how you're changing the cross section. There's slopes. Where does the water go? Is it going to be more? Is it less? We're going to have less pervious because you're removing the island that's landscaped, and you're going to be putting in paving there. So depending on the design and all that, I received some information from John Butler, and I forward that to the planning board members, of kind of a compilation of a poll that he took of the neighborhood of who wanted to have the island removed and not. And I think the purpose of that was to show that the residents do want to have it removed for the most part, it's my understanding. I'm not 100% sure, but the island may be under the jurisdiction of the homeowners association. I think that was part of the deal when that subdivision was approved. So, you know, what's that implication? Does the town own it and the homeowners association is required to maintain it? And town council said that's something he would have to look at the deeds and such to determine all that. So that's where it is. I'm not sure if it's coming up for paving or if it's fallen to the bottom of the list. But if they do intend to remove that island, it should definitely become before the planning board for a public hearing so that the neighborhood can respond and say which way they would like it to go. You know, one can't speak for all, and it's best to hear from everybody so we have a good understanding, and that way later on it can't be said that it wasn't transparent. And it's the proper process. It's the way.
Karina, who did you speak to from the town? Was it just Kathy Cook?
Yeah, I spoke to Kathy about it, and I spoke to town council about it.
I mean, I think I'd be in favor, we should proactively send a letter to Karen, because she's in charge of all the paving, right? Oh, you already did, okay.
Karina already communicated with Karen Galligan, and Karen agreed with her that.
No modification.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I'm
So-
sorry, I couldn't remember that. We did email back and forth.
Okay, so are they not gonna? They know they can't take the island out before a modification comes through?
Well, they've been,
Fire hydrants and stuff.
they've been,
Oh.
yeah, they've been informed that that was town council's opinion, and that's what the planning board anticipates, and that's what they should do.
Okay, thank you, sorry. Let's get late.
And it's, I've informed Kathy Cook and I informed Karen in an email.
I wonder,
Okay.
I wonder if we should memorialize this in a letter from the board,
Yeah,
just referencing that you had spoken to Karen, spoken to town council, and that if this moves forward, it would require a modification of the subdivision. And have it go to,
and who's gonna pay for it?
you know,
Because Fuss and O'Neill, you're talking drainage calculations, everything else, you gotta like, is the town just gonna pick this up or are the residents gonna pay for that?
Well, if you think about it, if DPW is gonna redo the road, they have to do the engineering. It's all a matter of whether the homeowners are in charge of it and want it gone, or because we also have to relocate the fire hydrants.
Yeah, it depends on ownership too. It's not 100% clear who owns that island. So yes, I did have an email from August 22nd that I sent to Karen and Fire Chief Achilles, and I copied Mark Purple and Mimi and Town Council, kind of clarifying where we're at and explaining Town Council's opinion. And I was asking Karen what the status of the road was being paved. And I asked Chief Achilles about the hydrants and those implications to the water line. Karen said that, I believe Karen said that it was no longer on the list or something like that, that it had fallen off. And Fire Chief said he had to go look at the hydrants. So he wasn't opposed to moving them or taking the island out. You know, and he opined on what impacts his department. So I can draft a letter to make it clear and for the record that the planning board
Yes.
expects that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. This one will be faster than the last one.
Any other comment from the board,
Well, thank you, Karina.
from the audience?
Oh, you're welcome.
Can I just add that I believe from my understanding of clearing in section from Davis Road is that
There's no issue with the engineering, there's no issue with the water, there's no issue with the hydrants. This is a neighborhood request because of some sort of landscaping, tree difficulty to maintain. Is that correct?
well,
Snow removal.
Snow removal, okay.
I think Mr. Butler clarified that this didn't come from the neighborhood. The Department of Public Works.
Hello,
Evening, Mr. Butler, how are you?
I'm well. So a few clarifications here. First of all, the origin of the proposal to remove the median came from the Department of Public Works. It did not come from the neighborhood. The Department of Public Works, Ms. Galligan told me when I approached DPW about possibly putting irrigation system into the median, that it was up for repaving at some point soon, and she would prefer to remove the median, but she would only remove the median if the neighbors were supporting that concept, and if the neighbors wanted to keep the median, she wouldn't remove it. But her reason for wanting to remove it primarily was snow removal. And she also stated to me on a few occasions that we discussed this, that that she had approached town council about the question of authority to remove the median, and had the opinion from town council that after a road was accepted, that it was the purview of the street commissioners, which is the select board, she and the select board, and that it did not need to go back to planning board. I have no opinion about this subject whatsoever, except that, except that I think that if planning board wants to have a public hearing on this question, it would be good to get it done in a timely fashion, that is before next year's paving budget comes up for review, because this was an impediment to getting it done this year, because at the end of the process, the select board, I guess, can always choose to want to hear from the planning board regardless of what the legal requirement is. And I think that they wanted to. So it looks like regardless of what the underlying legal situation is, that it's desired by multiple public hearing run by the planning board. And my only request as a resident here would be that we not wait till the last minute to get through that process, because it could cause delay again in this. Although the DPW brought up the subject of wanting to remove the median, the median has been a terrible thing for 30 years, because people constantly need to park on the sidewalk because you can't get past a parked vehicle if it's at the curb. And we constantly have problems with landscaping trucks. Every kind of delivery truck you can imagine is a problem here. And so, although I had no expectation that the DPW was going to suggest this, they have their own reasons for wanting to get rid of the median, and the residents strongly would like to get rid of the median as well. So again, my only request would be just let's not wait till the last minute on this. It's probably going to be on next year. It didn't make the cut this year because of some of these questions. I just don't want that to happen again. The other thing I would note, and I noted this in a letter to you, that the map that you're showing is wrong, specifically of the subdivision, specifically on the point that is under concern here, because there is an emergency access into the middle of Davis Road now through Admiral's Glen, which was constructed after the Davis Road subdivision. And the emergency access route through from Admiral's Glen was shortened the single path of both roads at the same time. And it was built for that purpose. So, it would be, I just point out that we're putting up maps that are no longer accurate, because there is specifically emergency access from Admiral's Glen subdivision through to Davis Road, thereby shortening the single barrel access part of Davis Road. Anyway, that's the basics of this. When Ms. Galligan was under the impression that it was in her purview solely, she's said she got that information from town council. The question then arose as to how the neighborhood was going to be polled with respect to this, and I volunteered to help out on that front. This was back in September of 21. So we polled the residents in writing, and 9 of 13 abutters responded. All of them wanted to see the median removed. But at this point, if we want to go forward with the public hearing process, fine, let's just get on with it.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. So someone would have to apply to modify the subdivision.
That would be Ms. Galligan, because she's the originator of this concept.
Okay. So that it would, then it's in her court.
Yeah, I'll get back to her about this. It's just needs to get done before next year. Now, there was an engineering design drawn, by the way. A couple of other things that have just come up in the conversation here. One is that there was an engineering design drawn, enough that she thought was adequate to both present to the residents, because I needed something that we could show people, and the other, and to guide the actual work to be done. The total paved area shrinks as a result of this. So we don't have an increase in impermeable surface area. We have a decrease in it, but sort of minor. The hydrants do need to get relocated, as has been obvious from the beginning. But I think the plan was to relocate them to the right side as you're entering, but that I think that Ms. Galligan was planning on, DPW was planning on settling that matter with the fire chief as to which side to relocate them on.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. So we'll look forward to that application from DPW then. And the next item on the agenda is the discussion item, Ken's Food Noise Barrier Study, Final Report and Recommendations. And I will note that Ms. Demaria has recused herself from commenting as a member of the planning board on this, but she can certainly comment as a resident. Karina, do you want to update this or do you want me to do it?
Go ahead, you can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pass it on.
So I asked that this be on the agenda because I received this report from the chair of the Board of Health. And the Board of Health has a meeting tomorrow morning on this. So I was hoping to get any comments from the planning board, and I plan on attending the Board of Health meeting tomorrow morning, and I can relay those comments to the Board of Health. And what,
That's it.
no, that's page 1. So what this ended up being was not what I had envisioned when we wrote the condition that a sound wall that was a collaboration with the 2 sound experts would be proposed. This has 3 sound walls. It has the sound wall that Ken's originally proposed in the middle of the sidewalk. It has the sound wall that the noise consultant for the abutters proposed along the perimeter. And then it has a 3rd wall that is along the perimeter, but a little shorter. And there's no conclusion in this report, although in the summary, it kind of pushes the middle of the road, middle of the parking lot wall because it's cheaper than the other ones. So personally, I'm not a fan of the middle of the parking lot. I can't figure out how they'll keep trucks from parking on the western side of the wall. And the long wall, which was proposed by the abutters noise consultant, there isn't much between the shortened long wall, which appears to be the compromise noise barrier, and the long, there isn't that much of a gain in noise reduction. So, and I should note that I attended a meeting this morning with the public health nurse, Chelsea Malinowski, who's the Board of Health chair, Mr. Maria, who's a direct abutter, and discuss this. And I'll let Mr. Maria speak for herself, but it appears that that short and long wall is agreed upon by everybody, although this report doesn't mention that.
So was there no recommendation in this report? I didn't have a chance to read it.
No. So if you go to page 21. I think 21. Oh, no, maybe not.
Summary.
There. So if you, when you're finished reading that, let me know and want to point you to if you could go back a little bit, Colleen, there's a 3-color chart. There it is, right there. So this, and this is where they discuss the, if you could make it a little smaller so you can see the little wording underneath. There. So they discuss this Mass Department of Transportation cost figure that deems what's reasonable or not. And it's part of some Mass Department of Transportation rules or regulation, which sadly I read. And and this feasibility and reasonability as far as costs is one of, they look at 3 different things and it's like, is it this? Yes or no? Is it that? Yes or no? Is it this? Yes or no? And if it's yes on all 3, then it says it's reasonable and feasible. And they're only looking at one and they're trying to say that the cheapest one is the best if you read down a little. But if you look, it only reduces noise that 5 decibels, which is what is recommended to be effective on 9 receivers on the short wall, whereas it's 11 on the long shortened. So that one's more effective at the noise reduction, which is, I think, the purpose of all of this. And the cost thing never really entered my mind.
These two are almost identical.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So these, so the long wall and the long shortened are almost identical. So the having the extra length and the extra cost, which that isn't really worth it because it's not much of a difference.
I'd actually question their math. Or if they're charts, because they actually do look identical. The ones that have a lower number have a higher average, and a lower number have a higher average cost per IL. There's not that much of a discrepancy. Did they just copy and paste the same thing in middle and last?
I don't think so.
Some variation, like 68 flags.
0.8.
Yeah. 43, 44. Or 40, 44, 45.
Yeah, I agree. They're virtually identical.
So is it, are we supposed to decide on this tonight, or are we waiting to hear from the Board of Health and then see what they say?
Well, I was hoping that there'd be some opinion from this board that I could share with the Board of Health to help them. I think from speaking to Ms. Malinowski this morning, it would be her recommendation to the Board of Health to ask these 2 noise experts who are going to be at this meeting tomorrow to pick the most effective. And because she said, we're not sound experts, I don't want to have to. But from looking at this, it seems to me that the long shortened would be the best option. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment on this as a private citizen? No?
My only comment is I didn't have a chance to read it, so I don't think I could provide an opinion because it's not educated at this point.
Good. I defer to the experts too, just like you're saying, Ms. Malinowski was going to do. Ask them what is going to be the most effective to help the residents,
Right, yeah,
regardless of cost.
yeah.
I mean, if they're negligible, then okay, but you can put anything down on a piece of paper.
Well, I think, I mean, there's all kinds of facts and figures and data. And so I think that this is based on the data. But it just seems to me that the short one doesn't affect, it doesn't cover enough properties. And I can't get my head around the fact of if there's a wall in the middle of the parking lot, how do you stop trucks from parking on the wrong side? And when they did the testing, did they have trucks on the other side? Like, so, I don't know.
Not practical.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So that the recommendation would be to have the sound experts agree on a wall.
Well, yeah, that's what I would go on it.
A perimeter wall.
And I assume it's not gonna be
Makes sense.
the shorter one.
Okay. Very good. Anybody else? Any of our three participants have anything to add to that?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. We have the recording clerk and 2 additional attendees, no hands raised.
Okay. And Chelsea, if that Chelsea is Chelsea Malinowski, did I misspeak and misrepresent you?
You muted, Chelsea.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Chelsea.
this is Chelsea Malinowski. Nope, you're accurate. So thank you for your input.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Okay.
Very good. So that is the agenda. Now we move on to the planner's report.
Okay,
Speed round, right?
yep, speed round. Number 1, MBTA Communities, Town Council provided an advisory on the updated guidelines. I have to review them in more detail, and we have to start thinking about this MBTA Communities because the deadlines are coming for the next step. So we'll start focusing on some of that, and Mimi will talk to you about this during the regular work week. Keep you updated and inform you and get some ideas of how, what, when, where, and all that. The second thing is new police chief is appointed, and it was Ryan Newell who they selected. We have that. Oh, the master plan implementation committee is going to be starting their meetings coming up. As you recall, they're to help keep the process going and get implemented. And I believe that'll be the week of the September 28th for the first implementation meeting. And that was the members there were Judith Watson, Debbie DeMoria, Lisa Braccio, and Catherine McKee are on that committee. We have the master plans that we still have to finish handing out, so we'll get those out to the implementation committee for sure, so they have their copies, and various others. And I think that's it. We don't have any meeting minutes this evening. We have a little bit backup, not bad, as we're transitioning from Kate Battles. Bridget Rubin is doing our minutes right now, and Colleen interjects with some of the in-between meetings. But at the next planning board meeting, we hope to have 4 or 5 sets of meeting minutes ahead of time so that you can look at them all. Some are already mostly finished. They just need a quick review. And that's all I have.
Special town meeting, 10/13/2022.
Yes. Yes. And we have one
Motion.
more meeting before that. one more regular planning board meeting, but we'll be setting up the standard pre-special town meeting, 1 hour planning board meeting to just solidify any approaches on the town floor.
Very good. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Oh, second.
I have a motion and a second. Any long discussion on that?
Oh, Tim's got his hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to. Tim left for the recording.
Yeah, come closer.
So I don't want to keep you too late, but your name has come up several times in other conversations, and I just wanted to let you know what was going on. I've been working with the Accessibility Committee on a couple of sidewalk related issues. And I've pointed out that sidewalk and pedestrian turned up in the master plan something like 30 and 40 times respectively. I may have that backwards, but I mean, clearly I'm not the only nut who cares about them. So the context where you come in is I've been pushing at the selectmen who approve these peculiar things called pole permits. These are what the utility companies come forward with when they want to place poles or equipment someplace. And I've been concerned that when the selectmen have been looking at this, unless I make a noise, no one thinks about, well, what impact would this have if we would put a sidewalk on this street sometime in the future? It always strikes me as stupid to not think about it because it's very expensive to move a pole, once it's been installed. The Accessibility Committee agrees, and it turns out that the accessibility coordinator is someone by the name of Mark Purple. We may have heard of. He wears enough hats to drive you crazy. Drive him crazy too, probably. It sounds like he plans to administratively put something in the selectmen's policy, but where you keep coming up is, well, but what about when site plan reviews happen? How do we make sure that even when people aren't putting in a sidewalk now, that thought is being given to the possibility? The thing I've said about this is that I may not live to see it, but it seems to me that the goal from out of the master plan is that every street eventually has a sidewalk. And, it won't happen tomorrow, it won't happen next week, but it's really dumb whenever you make a change not to think about it. So that's sort of the short form of what's going on. If you look at the minutes of the July 25th meeting, I did 2 different slideshows on 2 different related issues. I'd be happy to do it here if you're really interested. But I thought you should at least know that your name has been.
Savannah sent that out. Did everyone get that?
Yes, yeah. I just hadn't had a chance to read it.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to read it, but you did see that.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
Now you can.
So we have a motion and a second. We've had our discussion on favor and trail, yes.
No, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
The technical difficulties.